I'm assuming.
Out here,
What's that?
you're live out here.
Ooh.
Oh, that one.
Oh, that one. We did that.
This is my live mic story.
Oh, yeah.
I assume every mic is live story. We're playing in a wedding band. Right? I'm behind the drums. And the bass player that I grew up with, standing there, and he ought to know better, but we play some tunes, and the mother of the bride comes up and she goes, "It's time for the garter. It's time for the garter." You know, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So they pull a chair out of the middle of the dance floor. The bride is just huge. And she sits down and goes, and lifts her dress up, right? And DeVos is standing in front of his mic. He goes, "Oh boy!" And it like booms through the floor. And the father and bride, "Oh boy."
Hello.
Just can't believe how early I am.
I know, right?
It's like 10 hours.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Good. Are you guys gonna be up here tonight, or you?
Oh, we're gonna be up here.
Okay, perfect.
That's what we're planning.
All right. Test.
work session first, before we get introduced to new employees, which is the first item on our agenda. We're gonna go around and introduce ourselves, so the folks in the room know who we are, and we'll start back there.
Cindy Showerman, and I'm on the planning commission.
Paul Renmark, on board.
I'm eating. Ken Bennett, he's on board.
Caleb Solzman, building official for safety.
Barry Wilson, town board. Miles Baker, town board.
David Sislowski, town board.
Tom Jones, town board.
And I guess, that's
Victor Talent, planning commission.
Scott Boston, Director of Planning.
So I think
And
you're
then I
ready.
can do burn through, and you're gonna introduce us to the new employees.
Yeah, so do you want to introduce him?
Sure, so Sandra's our newest planner one. She's
What was the first name?
Sandra.
Sandra.
Sandy, you go by Sandy, right?
Sandy.
So yeah, Sandy fills the planner one position that was vacated by Devin King. And so we also have our other planner one that's open right now because Carrie took a job with CDOT. So Sandy has been with us about a month now and fitting in great with the team. If you want to kind of give them a little background.
Okay, well, I'm originally from San Antonio, Texas. I used to work on the famous Riverwalk in the San Antonio River Authority for almost 10 years, and then I moved here in 2000. I have a bachelor's degree in architectural design, and then after the recession in 2008, I couldn't find a job, so I went back to school and got my master's degree in urban and regional planning from the city of Denver. So now I'm here.
Well, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you build a river walk along the path?
Yeah, he's not kidding.
I think.
You know, it's funny, I read out
I think the
front of-
environmentalists would not want that. It was, San Antonio was built in a lot different era back then, so I don't think environmentalists would be too happy.
Yeah, and actually Sandy worked on the private side on a lot of the original Water Valley projects. So she's got a lot of familiarity with Windsor and our development history as well, so.
I used to work for Fry River, so with Ripley Design, we did a lot of all that stuff.
Great. Okay, and then I'd like to introduce Christine Martin. She goes by Christy, and she's my new executive analyst. So, Christy, town board, introduce yourself.
I'm Christy. I went to CSU. I have my bachelor's in, actually in horticulture,
Wow,
which is
plants
not
have never looked
related.
better. They're like- My spider plants are like, thank you, finally.
And I grew up in Boulder, I went to CSU and then moved to Windsor after got married and we started having children. Then I stayed home. I have 5 kids that are ranging from 10 to 21. 2 oldest are in college. And I actually found Windsor from reading a book called The Undaunted Garden. I didn't tell you that. Everybody, Lauren Springer, she was a horticulturist that lived here. And I drove around Windsor trying to find her house, and I fell in love with Windsor and her house, but she had moved by then. So
So you're a stalker too?
I was a stalker, yes. So my mom, some of you know, she's a stalker. She's from Hungary, and she's been getting to know people in town for the last 10 years currently. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. I worked down in Greeley for Fells Point, and I was an assistant down there. So that's how I ended up here. Nice to meet you.
Great, well, welcome. Is there anybody else?
No, I think that's 2, and then again,
We were going to introduce Shane, but
Yeah.
we thought it was
gonna
going to
be here at 6.
6.
Yeah. So, yeah,
And I think Terry, we're missing Terry Walker.
we had our wires crossed with HR. They thought the meeting started at 6, so we had 2 here. And so as these next 2 come in, we'll just, at some point, kind of do a quick break and reintroduce them. That's okay.
All right.
Great.
Okay, great. Okay.
We're just hanging out as well.
So we're ready to get started on our first item this evening, is the 7th Street traffic update. Dennis, are you going to be leading
I'll
us
kick
off
it
with
off
that?
here. So, I think we're all familiar with 7th and Main and some of the traffic issues we have there. And we budgeted money this year we were thinking we were going to build a second northbound left turn lane on 7th. So we hired Interwest Civil Engineers and Fox Tuttle Hernandez Transportation Group. And so one of the first things we did was had them look at some of the traffic data, and it was traffic data provided to us by CDOT. And then we discovered that the CDOT traffic data was from last June, when there's no school. So then we had Fox Tuttle Hernandez do another traffic count in February with data that did include school traffic. And then they've analyzed that, and they're here tonight to talk about their findings, possible alternatives that will help the situation, and then answer questions you have. But I want to introduce Steve Tuttle with Fox Tuttle Hernandez, and he's the traffic expert. And Omar's been working with them and Interwest also, so I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Dennis. And Mike Oberlander will probably be coming in hot from Interwest, but I think he thought the meeting started at 6 too. So as Dennis noted, we went out and got new traffic counts, realizing that the CDOT counts in the summer weren't really relevant, particularly to the school peak time traffic backups that we were seeing at the intersection. And notable to point out, this graphic here just shows the morning, kind of the 7 to 8 a.m. peak hour, afternoon school pickup time in the early afternoon, and then the third number on each of these, third number is the PM peak hour, so the typical evening rush hour, what's going kind of the end of it right now. And what's interesting in some of these numbers, and so the northbound left is kind of the key issue. If you're familiar with the intersection, particularly in the morning, you're driving through, that northbound left backs up, and it can back up. I mean, our cameras were only going about a block south of Walnut, and it was certainly backing up worse than that in the morning. So we'll talk about that in a second. I'll show you some pictures. But in the context, we'll need to come back to these numbers because we're talking between 300 and 350 vehicles per hour for a left turn, and that's pretty high. And that's when you look at a left turn, you say, well, at 300, you start thinking about putting in 2 left turn lanes. So that's kind of where the previous idea of putting dual left turn lanes came in from. But notice that in the morning, it's 339, and in the evening, the left turn's actually higher. And if you go out there, my experience in watching it, and granted, I don't drive it every day, but just sitting out there for half an hour now, is that we're not seeing the same level of backups in the evening. But the signal timing is just about the same, so why is that? So we'll look at that in a second. And I'll give you a little sneak peek. It's because of this. The through volume goes from about 300 to about 200. In the evening, there's a lot less through traffic that block the left turn lane. So we're not surprised that the morning and typical evening peak, morning and evening peak hours are the worst periods of traffic. The school afternoon period wasn't that bad. It was a lot shorter of an issue. So we got the counts, as Dennis said, in February. We also set up a bunch of video cameras, 2 on looking south or north from Walnut and through the Walnut intersection, and then 2 of them looking west. So we were really looking at what was going on with eastbound traffic because we know that backs up pretty bad too. So the observations, what we started seeing northbound, this is when everything kind of broke down on the morning we watched. Everything was fine until about 7:27, and it just happened to be one signal cycle where there was enough through cars that got back to about here, and now none of these cars that wanted to turn left, and there's a lot more behind me, couldn't get into that lane. And once that happened, for half an hour, it was just compounding and getting worse because people are getting stuck. You know, the left turners and the throughs are combined in one lane. And you'll see right here that, you know, there is parking permitted up just past the alley, and then it turns into a right turn lane at the gas station. But you see that nobody's using that lane because it's just a right turn only.
There's usually that truck there in the evening. There's a truck that parks.
Yeah, it was there tonight too. So yeah, we'll talk about that I think at the very end. So that's where, you know, that's about the point at which the through queues are starting to block the left turns. And then that's again showing that right turn lane is pretty empty. So then looking in the evening peak hour, this was about, pretty representative. You could see that the through queue never really got back that far. This was kind of a busier shot that I took. You might get 10 left turns in one signal cycle, but they cleared. And the through volumes easily cleared both north and south. So then looking west, so this is at 7:40 in the morning, so the school, everybody's dropping off at the school. You can see a couple of things here. One, the eastbound traffic is actually backed up to about 9th, kind of just a rolling queue for about 4 blocks. And then you can see that the westbound traffic is actually backed up, and most of these vehicles are actually stopped right now. So you can imagine that, well, you could turn the northbound left turn on, but where are they going to go? They're going to run right into the back of this jam. And then this is actually looking, we're right at 8th here, looking towards 9th. And a few things in this photo that we're going to see was one, can't quite see it because it's small, but traffic's backed up all the way to 10th eastbound. And then there's drop-off. People are trying to pull into this drop-off lane here. And so that's what's causing these backups back towards 7th. And then in the evening, thought it was interesting that, this is pretty early for the peak hour, but by 4:20, we've already got a rolling queue for about 4 blocks. It's really the bottleneck that 7th creates by having 2 lanes and, dropping into 1. And so probably not too surprised to see that. So not to get too technical, but these are the phasing diagrams. But what's important to see is in the AM, it's a 100-second cycle, so it's a little over a minute and a half that it cycles before it starts over. And the northbound left is phase 7. That gets about 24 seconds of arrow, green arrow. That's the max time it could get, and it's using all of it in the morning. But then the north-south, the north-south actually gets another 28 seconds. So together, that's actually more than east-west is getting. And then the timing's pretty much the same in the PM, 105 seconds. You get 25 seconds of that's for that northbound left, but then 28 for the north-south through. And when I looked at that, I said, why are the north-south throughs getting as much time as east-west? When the volumes, we could go back to the volume graphic, but I could tell you that the east-west volumes are twice as high as the north-south. And a lot of that is it's there because if somebody pushes the pedestrian push button, they need 24 seconds to get through all the clearance times. So that's why it's set so long. But basically what we're seeing here is there's no easy fix in the timing. We looked at the timing, we said you really can't take time from anywhere else to give to the movements that need it. It's pretty squeezed tight. So north-south actually getting a little more time than east-west, and it's largely due to those minimum pedestrian crossing times. So the possible improvements, what was identified that Dennis noted the previous project was, well, let's widen on the southeast corner towards the gas station to create a new right turn lane. And then we can make the existing right turn lane a through, and then we can use the existing through lane as a second left turn lane. So that does require widening, and I think that was about a $300,000 give or take budget. And then you said, well, even if you got the duals, this is not going to be perfect because you still may see some of those backups occurring from school activity. But it definitely would increase the left turn storage capacity, so you'd see the storage queues go down. But here's the issue with it that we saw, is that when you go to a dual left turn lane, CDOT, their standard is to allow that left turn movement to operate only on an arrow, call that protected only. So right now you get 24 seconds of arrow, but then you get 28 seconds of a green ball. And it's, in the busy times, it's not free flow, but you usually get 2 or 3 guys at the end of that sneak through. We call those sneakers. But so you get a little extra capacity. You can imagine at 10 o'clock at night, you don't even need the arrow. You just get the green ball and you go. But that would be 24/7, is that they can say, no, that has to operate on an arrow. And so that actually decreases the capacity of the intersection. And again, we said there's no more time to give. So instead of getting 24 seconds plus 28 to make a left turn, you just get the 24, and that's all you got. Now, you got 2 lanes to do it, so you would get some double the amount of cars doing it, making that movement on the 24. But particularly during off-peak times, it would not be very desirable to operate it that way. So then, what would work? And then this is where Mike can talk when we pull up the plans a little bit. But the idea is to do some restriping and make some modifications that we think can help. mitigate the issues without having to actually widen the roadway. The two things we need to do is we know we need to increase the northbound left turn storage because we don't want people spilling back south past Walnut. But we also need to enable those left turners to get into that lane and not have the through queue back up so far that they can't get into it. And how we do that, and the critical improvement here is to restripe and resign northbound approach to have a single left, a through, but then to have that curb lane be the curb lane that is a right turn only to become a through right. So the concept and how it achieves those goals that we were talking about, and this is actually Walnut looking north, so Maine's about right here. I don't know if from the back of the room you can see this, but the existing stripe ends about right here. So this is about the point at which somebody can enter the left turn lane. So it increases that left turn lane. So it actually stripes it as 2 lanes here. So they can come straight out of here through Walnut and start stacking in that left turn lane. So it adds about 7 vehicles could fit in that space. And that's about 175 feet further south that somebody can get into that left turn lane without having the through queue block. So even based on today's through queues, this would probably be enough to work. But then also by allowing that curb lane now to be a through as well. And if you're familiar with the intersection, there's already a second accepting lane to the north, and then it tapers, I think, south at the railroad tracks, a little further north of the intersection. But that would significantly help. So I'll pull up Mike's. I did, yeah, I've got this. And let me show you real quick, just a real quick model. This is a calibrated model that we calibrated the existing conditions, and I actually had this where it was backing up through Walnut, and all I did was do what we're talking about. I made this portion north of Walnut a second lane, and this is 8 times speed, but this is the morning peak hour, and I can't promise it's going to be this good, but just seeing the model kind of verify that that it would work a lot better. I think just based on the fact that you got more people turning left in the PM peak hour, roughly the same timing, but the evening works. I think you could say that if you do this, it's certainly going to operate as well as it does in the evening today, but it's not going to look like it does in the morning today. So.
And could you touch on, I know that CDOT optimizes signals earlier, I think like kind of January, right after school came back in. I don't know if you could do a fair comparison looking at the earlier traffic data from last year to what's going on now. Do you know if that's had its desired effect?
Well, we based our signal timing on what the optimized corridor timing that they provided us from June of last year, and it based on the data from June. And so I was actually surprised that typically CDOT will say no, we want our main street, our highway to have a lot more green time than the side streets. And so this was a very balanced timing approach. But again, I think to help eastbound and westbound traffic, if this is striping and signing, if this works and it says, okay, this is helping a lot, we're not seeing issues, maybe we can start to steal some time back from north-south and give it back to east-west. So let me pull up.
So just to clarify, it's purely striping, you're doing nothing with the signaling changes?
Do you want to segue into, Mike, do you want to?
Sure.
Your stuff? I'll pull up the, see if I got these in the right order, but
You can just go, that's just
that
what
was
you
the left
showed.
turn, yeah.
Yeah, go to that. You can go to 1 or 2.
Okay.
And I can. I'm Mike Oberlander with Interwest Consulting Group. So we're a company here in Windsor. Have done a lot of work for you guys over the years. So to your point, there wouldn't be any change to the signal itself. I think we would have to add that outside lane is a through right instead of a right only northbound, which is probably on the signal and would need someone's permission with CDOT, since I think it's CDOT signal. But this, and Steve, why don't you, can you scroll down? Let's go down to Walnut. This is one of 2 ideas that we've given Dennis and Omar. This one leaves everything south of Walnut alone, but there is the one property right in the middle between the 7-Eleven and Walnut that has no alley access or anything. Doesn't have a garage off of the alley, that has a car typically parked in that lane that is kind of one of our pinch points. This, and it's a little hard to see because of the colors, shows popping a parking spot for that house. I mean, it'd have to be public, but very similar to Main, just west of 7th, where there's kind of that parking row. If we did something like that, we could,
This is, I think, the one, there you go.
yeah, and then this is an alternative to that, where we basically get move the left turn so that it's the whole block northbound, and then give some space without doing any curb improvements or pulling out any landscaping to allow a couple parking spaces in that area, but then as soon as you get north of the alley, open up to 2 through lanes, and then this has the left turn lane all the way from Walnut. And if you scroll down, what it would look like at Walnut is we'd have to do some shifting even south of Walnut, but still all the curbs stay put.
So is that the only, those are the only two options then today? Would there be any way to get access from the alley? I mean, even if the town constructed it or gave them some access, would there be any way to achieve that?
I don't, for that one house?
Yeah.
I don't think so, because the garage is really close to the alley, and you think possibly a parking stall right off the end of the house between there and the alley?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I mean, if we're talking about rerouting so much traffic forever or getting to the curb, I mean, if we're gonna spend money to make the condition better, I just wonder if there's a better long-term solution for that homeowner that helps us move traffic better.
Looks like there's quite a bit of, I don't know if those are trees on the north side of the house. You have to tear out all those trees or whatever they are, to put a parking stall in. And unfortunately, in the front, the lawn there, those are shrubs.
Right.
Dennis, how much right-of-way do we have on both the east and west side of 7th?
I think it's 100 feet. It is just behind the sidewalk, you see there. That's public right-of-way.
Because with all due respect to their study, I agree with making the left-hand turn lane come all the way down the way it does. But I come this way into Windsor every day. And this is, because this is messed up right now, everybody uses Stone Mountain as a shortcut, which turns Stone Mountain into a thoroughfare going right by the school and Tozer, et cetera. I think that having the left-hand turn lane extend down is part of the solution. Are we completely saying to have the middle lane be an optional left-hand is not an option at all?
I don't think per se that, I think that they're just, when they looked at it, all it's, I don't know that it applies to what we're trying to buy, so that's kind of.
I would agree with that, because the reason the left-hand turn lane actually clogs up past Walnut is because everybody's trying to go left. They're not trying to go straight or turn right. That's not the problem. And maybe, being direct about this, maybe we need to go in and take some of the right-of-way on the east side of the road in order to have the amount of lanes that we need, at least for the parking for that one resident, as well as to have dual left, one straight, et cetera, whatever CDOT will allow. I'm just, right there looking at that picture, that's just north of Walnut right now.
Yeah.
That second to the left arrow on the east side, that one right there, traffic comes all the way out to there. And see, it's not striped with the dotted line right there. So to technically try to squeeze around by the curb, that car that has been sitting right there has gotten hit before.
Yeah, this is legal parking right now,
Right.
even if it's not being used. And we do have, we do get quite a few people turning this southbound left, so this would maintain that lane, rather than, if we did a two-way left turn lane, and just said, well, if could be used either way. I think we would see people pulling into it.
Well, and part of the reason that that southbound left turn lane to go east on Walnut is so clogged up is because of the auto right coming off of Main. Instead of people waiting for 6 light cycles to get, go east past 7, everybody turns right there to then come south to then turn left to try to bypass the congestion on Main Street. So I'm not trying to get in the way of what the study says. I just know that I drive this every single day, and I know Mr. Slazowski probably comes this way every day too, but the rule of thumb in the 12 years I've lived here is, if I need to get to like King Soopers, I don't even go this way anymore. I'd rather take Stone Mountain, which turns roads that weren't anticipated for that much traffic, and I can bet all the residents on Stone Mountain would be begging something to happen here to try to alleviate that intersection at Stone Mountain 7, which we've also talked about as being a light right there because of how much traffic goes on at that intersection.
Yeah, Paul, now I think, I don't know you, I'll go all the way across from Liberty to 13 and come back and down the other way.
Yeah, I think we see, one caveat with this is, we get counts, but we don't know what the induced demand is. So if we actually make this work better, then people are gonna come back to it, and it could, it could then get, we could see more traffic through.
Well, and so you'd already said, but I just want to make sure the board understands. So the challenge with the double left turn lane is CDOT will allow, after you've lost the green arrow, you can still make a left turn on the green bulb. But if you have 2 left arrows, they don't typically do that. So once you had that 24 seconds, it'll be double that. So the question is are we really buying what we're looking to buy with 2 left arrows? If you have 2 lanes.
Nobody turns left on the green bulb. That's,
Well, it depends on the time of day. That's not-
oh yeah, at midnight, yeah, I'm just saying, the reason there's so many red car runners at that intersection, it's because there's so much flow coming south, from past the lake to go south that everybody turns.
Well, I just say it depends on the time of day. If I get out of here after 5:45 or so, it's no problem going left on a green bulb. So it's just time of day. I think when you're going through and it's like crazy, you're right. But that's really the distinction. And again, this is a board decision. At the end, if you guys say, look, we think we buy more with 2 left arrows, we're not vetoing that. That's your decision. It's not as clean as another lane improves this.
Well, and I've heard from a few constituents who are trying to get to the charter school at 7:30 in the morning. That's why there's that eastbound traffic jam coming at the same time people are dropping off at the junior high and high school. It's an eastbound traffic jam at this intersection because of everybody trying to make it all the way out to drop kids off because there's not bus service out to the charter school. So we have a morning eastbound congestion. We have people coming back from the charter school, as well as we have everybody coming back from work in Lovell and Fort Collins in the evening. So I mean, it's really coming both directions at both morning and night. So
I will say that, with the dual left turn lanes, if you go to 2 left turn lanes, you would still need to do this because you could add 2 left turn lanes, but you get those instances where people can't get into it. So you still want to lengthen that somehow. So
I agree. I just think we're lengthening it, but we're not solving how many cars can get through the intersection at one time unless we look at a double left or adding an extra lane where then we can have a full-time dedicated left or whatever. So
Shane, I think to your point, that 24-second lockout on the double turn is probably pretty critical. But the other thing is, I'm guessing when it is really busy, if people trying to get to the high school and everything, so they're going to want to be in the right-hand lane over 2 turns. But people won't want to wait, so they'll get in both. But as soon as they turn, they're going to try to cut over to get over to the school. So then you're going to end up with a mess of cars going through, but then everybody trying to move over to the right to get there.
Yeah, the right would be the preferred.
Yeah. So I'm not sure you'd end up gaining.
Okay, we'll then go to 2 left as option A. Option B, you're talking about extending the stack lane, the left hand, and by restriping, having 2 northbound, correct? So that part, in order to have 2 northbound, though, we got one property that has a parking issue. Have I got it? Okay, so rough estimate, if we were to try option B, it's a matter of restriping and maybe helping on that parking for one resident. I'm leaning toward trying that because that's the least expensive. My question on that is, kind of going with what Dave was saying, how does this, and Paul's raising too, how does this get more cars turning left in the same time?
Because what we saw was that there were cars that got stuck
Before they could get in.
south of
before they could get in
Walnut,
the stack.
because once the through lane backed up, it only took one cycle and then it compounded and people couldn't get to the left turn lane. And then once they're past Walnut, they're all stuck in the same single lane.
So would you estimate that by doing option B, we might get 3 more cars on the left turn cycle, or 4 or 5 or 100, or, you know?
I think what you'll see is that you would get, with people having access to that left turn lane whenever they want, you can get, what I was observing, on average, you get about 10 cars that go through on the green arrow.
Right.
And then you got
Yeah.
anywhere from 1 to 3 that kind of go at the end on the green ball, that, more like on the yellow, at the end of the phase, the sneakers. So this is gonna keep it the same, it's just gonna allow that to happen every cycle, because what the problem was, there was a cycle when there was a green arrow and there was nobody turn left, because nobody could get
Couldn't
the
get over
through
it.
lane. That is the issue.
So, where I'm thinking out loud here is if we did option B, it's gonna cost whatever. If it doesn't work, we can come back, right, and look at option A.
Option B would not preclude, and as I was saying, even if you do option A, I would do option B together with it, because you still need to get the access to the left turn lane further south, and this is.
Where do we start striping the line to go to 2 lanes? Because right now, that's all just 1 lane going north. How far south do we have to start going to make it into 2 lanes going
So
north?
this is, Mike can talk to this.
Yeah, so I looked at, on this one, if we start at the alley south of Walnut and do some shifting down there, we can get everything done basically from that alley, half a block south of Walnut up to Main. And with that, you wouldn't have to do any curb work. You wouldn't have to put in a parking space in the tree lawn. If you put a parking space in the tree lawn, you can basically accomplish this just from Walnut North. But I think this would be, if you're doing striping, doing a little more striping isn't a huge cost. We'd want some signs too.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry that I didn't.
The parking options. Paul asked you about right of way. What would be involved in that? What would we have to do? Yeah,
With this, where we're doing some restriping south of Walnut,
okay.
we just let them continue to park where they're parking. But everything north and south of them would be signed no parking. So not all the way down south of where the truck parks down to Walnut would need to be no parking for this to work.
But the one residence that has a parking issue, tell me again, what we would do about that?
But he could park in front of his house. I think
Yes,
is what they're saying.
so
One
right here,
space.
between the red lines would be enough room for parking. And basically,
And the north lane.
yep,
So that's one option. The other option would be for us to construct a cutout, like they said, like on Main Street, where we basically would go into the curb and gutter and give them space to park.
I'd be open to, if we could do something to help the residents.
Right, so then
Yeah.
you get them off that main thoroughfare, and then we wouldn't have to stripe. So I think the less expensive option would be just a striping, but maybe a better long-term would be to just get that vehicle off
Off
7th
the
Street.
road.
Just make it all no parking and give them a spot to park.
It's gonna happen eventually anyway.
Yeah.
right, and that would have no right-of-way. All the work would be between the walk and the existing road.
Is the idea of that to add another through lane, just because you're taking pressure off the cars in the middle stacking down and prohibiting access to the left turn?
Yes, so you shorten, the cars that are all in the through lane today now shorten in half.
So with the,
Well, in theory, if they fill both lanes.
Right.
But if I'm worried somebody's gonna be trying to turn right against the crosswalk and pedestrian, I'm not gonna get in that lane.
So yeah, we would
Where we're
anticipate,
trying
so
to-
let's say, today we in a single lane, that we were seeing, when we had issues is when we got about 10 cars going through, and it's about 250 feet, and that was blocking the left turn lane. I would, you would assume that maybe it wouldn't be 50-50 with a second through lane, you'd probably only get a third in that curb lane, but that's enough to reduce that queue by a few cars, in conjunction with now, we've extended the access to that lane by 170 feet by 77 cars. So that's 10 cars you don't have to worry about, in distances.
And everything you looked at says that the northbound right only really isn't
Yeah,
necessary.
it's
The
very-
second, making that a through right doesn't
Yeah,
hurt
I
anything.
think it was like 30 to 40 right turns an hour, turning northbound right, which normally wouldn't justify having an exclusive right turn lane like it does today. Well, yeah, the northbound right is 30 cars, so, for each hour, so.
Can I offer option B, since we just talked about C, which is the right-of-way on the east side of 7? We, instead of just doing the little bulb out for the car right there, kind of let them still park, but if all of that was a lane, we know our parking, our congestion problem is only gonna get worse. I mean, we're growing. So aren't we just kicking the can another 3 years? I mean, and then going, this is the way maybe we should have done it, had we just, if we're going through all this restriping, reconstruction to even do that little bulb out, why don't we make that how wide the road is? Because I know originally, Dennis, when we first talked about this, we were talking about how much right-of-way was there in front of 7-Eleven up there, towards 7-Eleven's digital sign. It doesn't affect their digital sign, but because we were talking about the extra lane needed at the actual intersection up there.
Jumping in the drawings, what you'll see if you zoom out just a little is if you add another, so we just are saying that right only really isn't necessary. So if you're trying to add another lane, then we gotta land it somewhere on the north side of the intersection, and then, you're just making a bigger and bigger project.
Well, what we were talking about doing is taking what's there, shifting everything one lane over, so that there's still two optional going, through, but that would allow for the second left-hand turn lane.
So
But I
this,
think
Is
they're
that the
kind of
model?
demonstrating here that we wouldn't need to do that and go to that extra cost.
Well, I think it's just kind of the question is spending the money, because if we had a solution, we've all been here. So if it was $500,000 and we can improve it, well, then let's spend the money, I mean, it's like, but I just don't know that spending this money right now actually buys what we're looking for. I don't know that spending the money actually gets us there, and it could cause issues that we're not really anticipating. So that's the discussion of,
Because I thought that was originally what we were trying to justify with that plan right there.
Right, and as soon as we modeled the double lefts with the red arrows, we weren't seeing.
yeah, it was
A lot of
showing no
improvement.
level of service, no capacity improvement by adding the dual lefts. Because you still have the issue with people getting into the lane, and then the issue that it only goes on the red arrow, on the green arrow.
so when you model striping it back, though, then what happens?
I mean, it's still a trade-off with the fact that it only runs on the arrow. And you're really not getting that many cars through for having 24/7, where it's only gonna be on a green arrow. And then the level of service, it was actually showing it slightly worse with the dual left.
Really?
That was what sparked our concern initially.
Yeah.
And what is the current level of service at that intersection?
Yeah, I've got it.
Yeah, and I know it's time of day, but
Yeah, it's,
like Z's and C's?
it's like D overall, but the, certainly the northbound left, when it fails, it's at an F, and the eastbound through in the AM and the PM, where it was, an E.
Yep, so kind of back to Paul's question though, because we know Windsor now, 30,000 people, we have this traffic issue. So here's a solution, what are we doing in 10 years? Because it just feels like it's gonna continue to just get worse. We're going from 4 lanes down to 2 lanes. 7th is busy, so you guys have any thoughts on that, overpass?
I'll let you start.
I have a thought because, we all know the days that school is in session, the northbound is not a problem. It doesn't back up, it's not an issue. So it's obviously school traffic that's causing it. How much more school traffic is gonna go to those two schools? There's a new high school and junior high and seventh, so, is the student population at these two schools pretty much capped or possibly even gonna go down?
The middle school's gonna go up.
Which one?
Windsor Middle School will be going up.
Okay.
And none of those Darwins can walk 2 blocks.
No, but the high school will be going down.
But parents aren't dropping off at the high school as much as they're.
Oh, yes.
Well, yeah, I've seen
TM
it.
TMP process is starting, so you're looking at some of those.
But at least the middle school, you can go north on Main and still cut around and get to the middle school.
Which is why you get that straight lane backing up and walking left turn lane in the mornings, but not at night, is because at the nighttime rush hour, you don't have that northbound to the middle school traffic like you do in the mornings.
Yeah, I mean, just from a practically what do places do when they're overwhelmed the street and they really can't put in more street is a ton of access control. So 6th and 5th become right in, right out. So all you have is east-west traffic on 392. Median gets put across Walnut so that you have no turning cars at Walnut, and you start spreading those turns that cause a problem out. And tell me if I'm talking out of school here, but I mean, that's what you did at 7-Eleven is what happens when the movements start messing up. The turn movements start messing up the traveling public. So,
You know, I don't know enough about the school operations. We talked about how that's a whole other, whole other deal. And the school operations get very expensive, but if there's a, possibility in the future to change the way that their access works, and how vehicles access that site and getting them off of the highway, off of Main Street might be something that can help certainly and to be able to have some additional capacity on Main Street through here. So.
How's that turning out in front of the middle school where people pull over to the right to let people in and out? I mean, that could potentially be extended out, but I don't know if that's part of the backup along Main Street.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of, at the beginning of it, it kind of starts right at the beginning of the block. But if you went on the other side, kind of towards the sports fields, it could be extended a little bit potentially. I just don't know if that's a pressure point though. Like when you were talking about people not being able to turn left because of the traffic on Main Streets. Yeah.
Goes right up to the crosswalk.
Yeah. Just a thought, I'm not saying it.
Well, there is going to be, the school district is going to look at building another middle school. But in the next ballot initiative, 2 elementaries and a middle school is what we were told.
I thought they were gonna add on.
Yeah, it's the planned expansion at Severance Middle to take it from 600 to 900, and then a
I think they
remodel
should
of
look at how
the
they are,
section.
they should look at how they're rerouting their traffic more behind it instead of in front of it. That's what
There's a question about that.
Because we had talked about that too.
Yeah, we talked about rerouting traffic.
Well, and really, that's a great discussion to have with them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, even if the town put in some money to
Right.
help the school district out,
Because it didn't help this problem.
yeah. I mean, Larimer School paid formally to move to Edge, maybe ours is pay the road, yeah.
Put a circle behind it where people can drive them out. Yeah.
What about adding an additional westbound through lane and shoving the pull-off for the school north as well? So through that section where the school is running, you have an additional lane, additional capacity. So then you could possibly do a dual left and maybe not have that backup problem we're worried about.
You're talking about on 7th between, or I'm sorry, on Main between 7th and school?
So a third lane here. I mean, if we start talking about the ability to widen the state highways here, we can add a lot more capacity. But,
Well, the Dollar Tree's right in, right out anyway right now.
there's certainly a lot of trade-offs to talk about widening the road and in a place that we want to try to get people to walk to school, ride their bike to school.
That's true.
1+2, because we're gonna have on the east side, it's gonna be 2 lane, and so a little more capacity on the west side. You know, I don't know if that just creates more issues when you get down to 1 lane.
Yeah, you're back to a funnel. It's just thinking of ways to keep cars move? How far west do you have to carry that through?
Well, I think the other discussion though, I mean, seeing if we can get them off Main Street, could we get them to access somewhere else? Could we just push this traffic off Main? That would probably create a lot
Yes,
of.
Steve alluded to that, looking at the school operations, doing a circulation study or something to drum up ideas, but then you're looking at
But is it worth, I mean, is it worth even just, I think it's worth just trying this initially, because there's not, I mean, how quickly could we implement this if we move forward? I mean, it's because it's some restriping and
Yeah, I
and there's
think,
not a lot of construction that has to take place. Because I think the biggest problem is folks, we've been promising folks a remedy for a long time, and they want to see something. So I think it's worth trying this option, like Ken said, and just see what does it help, or, you know, what are we worse than we were? I mean, I don't think we're going to be any worse than we were, but does it help us at all move it in the right direction? And maybe there still are additional things we have to do, but you can always do that later. At least this gets some improvements done, and I'm thinking this isn't something that's going to take, hopefully not 6 months to complete, or a year, but we could do it in a fairly short period of time, that it could be implemented by next fall.
Or sooner.
Or even
Because
sooner,
we
yeah,
would-
depending on
How
the
much
time.
CDOT process would we have?
not very much, because really it'd just be the restriping and then any signs we're changing in their right of way, I
And
think.
then what if we did construct that little bump out for the resident? How much design time is that?
I haven't studied the grades in there, but I think it'd be pretty simple. It'd be like a concrete driveway type of effort.
In Seventh, at that point, still County Road 2?
No,
No?
No.
it's Town of Windsor Street.
Okay, so we.
Yeah, and CDOT wouldn't have anything to say about anything south,
Well County.
no. And I don't know, something that small, do you guys have on-call, or would you have to bid something
I
like that?
think we could sit down with the contractor and figure it out.
Yeah, so that, from a timing standpoint, sometimes the bidding
So
takes
if we
longer.
made a decision to move forward with this plan tonight, we've got it already budgeted. How soon would we be able, how soon would it actually be online? And will we have any road closures in the meantime in order to construct any of this?
If you did the curb work, I think you could do that with traffic running. The striping, you guys do striping every summer. I mean, do you do it on a Saturday, or how do you usually?
you could.
Omar normally does it between 12 and 4 in the morning.
No, you could do lane shifts, I think you could work around it.
Yeah,
We could have it done before the start of next year's school.
yeah.
How about July 4th?
Well, yeah, well, I think we,
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
we probably want to target it, I mean, somewhere in the summer, so you can get out a little bit sooner, wait until school's out.
Right.
School's out.
And you guys know, like, street paint, I mean, that stuff dries in 30 seconds, I mean, it's really.
Yeah, take,
So we could do it quick.
removing the striping take longer than restriping.
Yeah, do we grind in our striping, or no?
I think that's just paint.
So is that the consensus from the board to try this? And
What was budgeted for this year? Was it just engineering was budgeted?
No,
or-
yeah,
I think the whole thing,
388,000.
Yeah, 385 or so. So yeah, we've got it, we did budget to do the left turn, the double left turn.
With right-of-way, the expansion of the roads figured into that, probably in the budget, wasn't it? So
yeah, that right turn lane.
I like option B. I'd like the cost on that cutout as well, just to see that.
Because that would be additional.
Well, I think we have enough money to do that.
Yeah.
So I suggest to the board, again, I just think getting this vehicle off of 7th Street is in the public's best interest. It's not gonna hurt us upper budget, we'll be well under
And it's
budget.
just one spot there, right? That 9 feet for one spot?
Yeah, just in front of their house, kind of like.
But I mean, in all reality, should we do 2 car lengths there so that they have room to get in and get out, or
They designed it and.
have somebody come over to visit?
Make it comfortable.
So the idea was that, you know, this house has access off of Walnut, and so they were really the one that was landlocked. So it'd be interesting to go to them, assuming that that's the owner there, not a renter, to go to them, you'd have, hey, this or this way, and they might say, no, we love our junipers. If we want to, we can find where to park, they'll probably be minimal amount of parking space.
So where on there are we talking about doing that?
Zoom in so you can see it.
Sorry.
It is in front of the house,
Yeah, I see that blues right there.
right there.
That's 9 feet.
9 feet wide,
Oh, 9 feet.
That's
not
one-
long.
one space.
It's about 30 feet long, I think. It's a comfortable space. There is a utility pole just south. I was trying not to move from a
Or
cost
there's a
standpoint.
sidewalk out to the street.
Right, yeah, so we would probably make it like butt right up to the
So
sidewalk.
30 feet is technically enough, they could get a couple cars.
Couple small cars, but that's a pretty big truck
Yeah.
based
Was
on
that what
kind
they
of.
have there?
Yeah,
It's
it's a,
probably 20 foot long.
yeah, it's a full-size pickup that you see there when you drive by and like on aerials. But that's scalable, you know, we definitely want to make it one comfortable space so you're not backing up to get out.
Well, it'd be better for them too, because I'm sure opening the door onto 7th Street and getting out feels perilous every time.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you showing a curb and gutter relocation on that?
What we do is leave the gutter right where it is and then just tip the parking space up so that it drains to the gutter so that we're not going. If this works the way I think it would, you just pop the gutter off and build from the edge of asphalt towards a walk, not going into 7th and asphalt patching.
More like a driveway opening?
Yeah, it'd look an awful lot like a really wide, skinny driveway opening, you know.
And Mike, you said that would have to be public parking now,
Well, yeah,
parking in public now.
it is now.
But
Mhm.
do you see any, shouldn't be any conflict?
Yeah, this is the only kind of landlocked parcel for an off-street space.
Yeah. Other than like a parade, I don't know when else that would be a choice spot for most people.
Right. And, I mean, they have legal parking on Walnut that if the spots, but I mean, if that spot's taken, it's not like they're
And then if we did that,
completely.
I assume we would sign the rest, say no parking, so by providing that spot, we would absolutely make 7th Street no parking in that area.
Well, and is the opposite side of the street is wide enough for parking? Is more than 20 feet wide?
Even after
I
the
just
shift?
don't think anybody.
After the shift it would be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we add the parking space, we're basically leaving the left turn lane in exactly the same spot, and the southbound is just as wide as it is today, which I think you just don't have anybody parking there, but I don't think it's restricted, I think.
But even if it weren't, you don't really have all
Right.
the traffic movements and stuff happening there, everybody's going
Right.
the same direction, so.
Yeah,
Occasionally, our officers have somebody pulled over there on the southbound side,
mm-hmm,
that they pulled over, or, you know, caught somebody on Main doing something, and they
yeah,
turned south and then pulled over, and people still have to go around them, it's not a problem.
mm-hmm.
That's a revenue generating site.
I didn't bring that up, but
All these land uses, though, these houses have access from Walnut to the south, and then this building's got separate parking.
Okay, so I think I heard on his board, we're,
I see a consensus to move forward with all of this, plus do the curb out.
Okay.
okay, great.
That-
Well,
that is
we'll move forward, like we said, if this isn't the dagger force, we're not precluding anything else. So, okay, great, so Mayor, with your pleasure, I'd like to introduce our other
Yes,
two
introduce a
people.
couple others.
So, Terry, you wanna?
So Mayor and Town Board, I'd like to introduce our new facilities manager, Corey Bosch. And Corey, if you would like to get up and speak a little bit about the background, that'd be great.
Good evening, everyone. I originally worked in this community a number of years ago. I was at Fort Act, and I see a few familiar faces here. I then moved on to a position in the Denver area for a few years, and then it's almost like coming home in a way. I currently live in Fort Collins with my wife, and we have two 27-year-old twins. Our daughter is a medical business guess during the summer months and nice weather, you could find me in the mountains. I enjoy just about anything outdoors. Camping, fishing, hiking, you name it. I look forward to working with all of you.
Welcome back.
Yes.
Did you do the demo for the women in planning? That's right. Is that? Did you do the demo for the women in planning? Is from Shannon?
Oh, I didn't make that connection. You're quick.
Mayor and Town Board, I want to introduce Shane Tim. He's our new construction inspector. There are two of them. Ken Brenneman, who left our construction inspector position and moved up to Public Works. So we hired Shane, and Shane will give you a little bit of his background.
I'm Shane. I've lived here all my life. Grew up in the Greeley area. Have a wife, 2 daughters, 8 and 3, so they keep me very busy. My background is mostly in water and infrastructure, so I did a lot of water lines and GIS and GPS. And so when we did the big water lines between 48 and 30-inch water lines, we would shoot GPS so that we knew exactly where that water line was located and for future reference, and then put it on GIS and build our maps and everything from that. I did a lot of construction inspection with that and building and learning how to make field judgments of poor engineering. I've done surveying for the last 2 years, and so I did everything from topo to altos to redesigning traffic intersections like you guys were doing, to try and figure out how to better situate stuff with right of ways and whatnot. So kind of my background and everything.
Well, welcome.
Yeah.
Is that everybody?
Hey, that's everybody here.
Okay, then we are ready to move on to our next item, which is the 2018 International Building Codes, Contractor Licensing and Residential Guidelines. Scott, are you going to be leading this discussion?
I'm just going to be introducing the Safe Built representatives. So if I could, if Mackenzie, if you want to, thank you. I'll turn it over to Russ and Caleb from Safe Built for the first part of that agenda item, talking about adoption of the 2018 series of building codes. And then the other 2 items, contractor licensing and residential construction guidelines, are a couple of conceptual items that I want to get some feedback from Planning Commission and Town Board. So with that, I'll turn it over to Russ and Caleb. So yeah, we can either use the ruler or the arrows, either one. But if you want to use,
Okay.
all right?
Well, good evening. Caleb, you're welcome to come on up too. I'm Russ Weber, building official. Used to be building official, now operations manager for Safe Built. The traffic studies, that's a good thing, because that must mean new single-family permit activity is healthy. So that's a good thing. So, yeah, it's that time again. We typically skip a code cycle. So we adopted years ago, and I've been here for 22 years, we adopted the 97 Uniform Building Code. We skipped the 2000 International Codes, and we adopted the 2003. Because the 2003 was a fairly new international code, it had some flaws. So we adopted the 2006 International Codes. We skipped the 09, and we adopted the 2012. We have since skipped the 2015 codes and are looking to adopt the 2018. It's a good code. We've partnered with Windsor for now coming up on 26, 27 years, and we definitely don't want to adopt a bad code. The 2018 code, as we got really into it, there's a lot of good things in it. It actually, the national HBA determined that for residential construction, the 18 codes actually reduced costs slightly and increased commercial, I think up to $500 to $800. So I don't know what they based those numbers off of and what areas, but we're going to talk about some things that'll kind of be clear how it did decrease some costs. So we are looking, and there's going to be some decisions that, we make these recommendations, and what we did was we took Windsor's current amendments that we enforce today, and we implemented them in to make sure they were either in the 18 codes, or we could remove some of the amendments that we had because now they're in the body of the code. So that's typically what happens is, through the years, municipalities amend the code to certain sections, and they find that a lot of municipalities amend it the same way, so they lobby to get it into the body of the code. So that's kind of what happened here. But there are going to be a few decisions that, we want the board to address. One of them you're going to see is the 2012 International Energy Conservation Code. Currently, right now, we've adopted the 09 Energy Code. It's a good energy code. But I think we need to increase it. I was just telling Ian McCarger tonight that there's a House bill going through Colorado right now that it's moving pretty quickly. That's it's going to pass. That every municipality that's adopted a building code has to adopt an energy code within the last 3 code cycles, which is going to be the 18, the 15, or the 12. So you're going to see a comparison that we've done on the energy codes, and that's going to be one that we're going to look for, what direction the town wants to, which direction they want to go. Northern Colorado, I don't know if you can really see all of this, but we took all the northern municipalities and what codes they are on. Currently, right now, Fort Collins has adopted the 18. Weld County has adopted it. Larimer County has adopted it. They're enforcing it today. Longmont started in January. I'm not sure where Loveland's at. They're they've got a little turmoil going over there, so I'm not sure where that with some code adoption issues. But a lot of our, just so that all of our municipalities are looking to adopt the same code, the same amendments. And the reason that we do that, when I say that, I say Wellington, Timnath, Windsor, Severance, all of our northern municipalities, Evans. And the reason that that's a good thing is that the builders can shift from one community to the other, and they still know the codes. They don't have to change gears. They can slide right in seamlessly. So, yeah, as you can see, most of the municipalities are on the 2012, and they are moving towards the 18. Like I said, your current amendments, we've put all of those in. I don't need to go through every one of them, but every year the IRC and the IBC, which is the International Residential Code and the Building Code, they always put 7-foot fences in there as an exception for needing a permit. Most municipalities don't allow that, just from street blockage and other things, so we always amend it back to 6 feet. We continue to add our definition for sleeping units. Surprisingly, that is not in the body of the code yet. The reason that we do that, and we have done that for over 20 years, is that we've made a definition that any room that has a closet or a layout that can be easily converted to a closet has to meet all the requirements for a sleeping room, meaning an egress window, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors. The reason we do that is people will put a basement, they'll finish their basement, and they'll put a closet in it, and it has no egress window, and they call it a sewing room. So if we don't have a definition, they legally could do that. Maybe they're going to use it for a sewing room, but the next property owner is going to use it as a bedroom, and we want to make sure it's got all the egress and ingress requirements. You're going to see some things that we're deleting out of the code. Obviously, we're recommending to delete residential fire sprinklers again. We did that in the 2012. What we are asking the board to take a look at is to maybe, we're recommending sprinklering townhomes. And the reason that we're asking that is that we see a lot of cases where gas grills flare up and they cause problems with the unit next door, and they are unaware of what's going on. In the body of the code of the 18, it's mandatory to sprinkle townhomes and single-family 1- and 2-family dwellings. We're just asking to not mandate the 1- and 2-family dwellings, but keep the townhome sprinkler requirement in there. So as we get towards the end, you're going to see some 5 or 6 decisions that we're going to, that's one of them that we're going to ask the board to kind of make a determination on. It's really not our call. We just take, you'll see some statistics that we put in here on why we think it's important. Wind speed, CO detectors, you're going to see that we made amendments to this because in both codes, the language is very argumentative, if you would. What it says is that carbon monoxide detectors shall be in the immediate vicinity of sleeping rooms. That's wide open for interpretation. So rather than have that argument, we're going to go with what the state of Colorado says, and they say they have to be within 15 feet of every sleeping room. It's just for the sake of argument. It's a good thing to have, but the immediate vicinity, there are a lot of builders out there that like to argue that one. Wind speed conversions, you're going to see that it has changed. The wind speed has not changed at all. It's just the way that it's calculated. We used to have a 90 mile an hour 3-second gust. Today, they use what's called ASCE 7-10. If you look in every wind map along Colorado, all the way along the Front Range, we're in what's called a special wind region. Nobody will tell you what that wind speed is because we get different winds along the Front Range. So what we have done is we've used the most current wind study that CSU has done, and they did it in 2012 or 13, and Safe Built donated quite a bit of money to help with that study. And what they came back with, and every municipality along the Front Range uses that wind speed study because there are no other maps to go off of. But I-25 is the dividing line. Everything east of I-25 is what's called 115 mile an hour ultimate design wind speed. If you interpolate that, you're going to find that the wind speed didn't change. It's a 90 mile an hour constant wind speed with 115 mile per hour ultimate design wind speed. So nothing has really changed, just the verbiage and the way that it's calculated has.
Sir?
Sure.
When you say that, what elements of the home are you designing to maintain, to accommodate that kind of speed?
Trusses and wall bracing. Those are the 2 biggest ones. Yeah. So since the 2003, 6, 9, and 12, and 15, and 18 codes, there used to be, wall bracing was very simple. It was, hey, you had to have it on every corner and every 25 feet. Now that wall bracing section is like 8 pages long. So we actually saw, and those of you in the construction business will know that like portal framing at a garage, you see, because the opening on the side of the garage is so small, the code now requires steel straps on each side that are embedded into the foundation. And we saw how important that was in 2008 when the tornado came through. You notice that a lot of the homes that came through over here, the wind kicked into that garage and took the whole garage away. What they're trying to do is they're trying to keep debris from flying. They just keep it together. It's not going to not destroy it, but it's going to limit the amount of debris that's flying. So those code sections rely heavily on the wind speed, on both wall bracing and truss design. Yep. You're going to see we made an amendment because if we modify, there's a table in the IBC for rating corridors, and they're normally, what the code says in the body of the code is it says that corridor needs to be a half-hour rating. There is no half-hour rating in the gypsum manuals or a UL file. So typically, you're going to see 5H Type X chipboard on each side of the wall, which is a 1-hour rating. So we're just amending that to say, hey, instead of a 30-minute, it's going to change to a 60-minute. It's no different than what they're doing today. It's just clear in the code. What we've done with some of the words that we're adopting in this code is we want simplicity. The codes really haven't changed a whole lot, but they've added words to make it easier for us to interpret the code. And that's really important. Occupant loads. This is an interesting one. So for B occupancies, for businesses, the occupant load factor used to be 100. So if you had a 1,000 square foot building, you have an occupant load of 10. Now they've changed that to 150. So that occupant load factor is now 150. It's lowered the occupant load, which does a lot of things. They've actually found that office buildings aren't 10 by 10 offices anymore. They're 10 by 15. They're 10 by 13. They're bigger than a 10 by 10 box. So in the reality of it, they changed the occupant load factor to 150. That also helps in lowering plumbing fixture counts. So the lower the occupant load, the less plumbing fixture counts you need in a commercial building, which saves money. So, and it makes sense. So,
That ties into the one on the bottom, 2102 as well.
yeah. So in B occupancies, you're going to find that in the 2012, if you did a tenant finish, let's just say on Main Street, and you have an occupant load factor of 15, patrons and workers, if you exceeded 15, you had to have separate sex facilities. That's a pretty hefty cost for a lot. You know, Scott, I know we see a lot of tenant finishes that want to come in, and they change that occupancy. And when they've got to saw cut the concrete and put another plumbing restroom in there, it gets a little costly. They've changed that to 25. So now the occupant load is at 25. So that, it's not a huge jump, but it's a little bit better.
So one thing with that, going from 100 square feet per occupant with 15, that meant if you went over 1,500 square feet, you had to add a separate restroom. Now with the increase to 150 square feet and 25, that jumped up to 3,750. So it more than doubled the size of a business tenant finish that you could do before you have to add the second restroom facility.
So they're really just trying to allow for same unisex facilities in one occupancy. We'll go to the next one. Again, that was the International Building Code. Now we're at the residential code. The same thing, 7 foot. We had to amend, if we amend out the sprinklers for residential 1 and 2 family dwellings, we also, there's a table in chapter 3 that allows for a different fire rating if your home is sprinkled. Because we removed the sprinklers, we need to amend that table as well. Emergency escape, we've kept this in. This has been a code that we worked with Windsor, wow, I'm going to say in the 2003 or 6 edition, is what we did was we just said, hey, if your window well complied with code when it was built under the 97 or prior uniform building codes, you don't have to modify it. What that means is that a lot of the older home window wells are 24 inches. Today, it's required to be 36 inches. We just made this amendment to say, and it's been in your code for 15 or 20 years, is that if you finish a basement and you put a bedroom in your basement, the window has to meet egress, the ladder has to comply with the code requirements, but the window well can remain if it was in compliance at the time the house was built. It's been a good thing. You don't have to pull up landscaping and sprinkler lines and things like that. So that we kept that one in. Fire protection of floors. This was in the 2012, and those of you who were around when I did the presentation for the 2012, we amended it out because I did a survey of Poudre Fire Authority, Windsor Severance Fire, all of the fire districts along the Front Range. What this one is that it's a code requirement that says if you have I-joists and a fuel burning appliance in your basement, you have to drywall the ceiling of the basement, even if it's unfinished. The intent of that was that the fire district said that in the event of a fire, the floor collapsed on their firefighters before they could get the fire out. I get it, because I-joists are combustible. But nobody could come up with a case file that ever happened. So nobody could come up with it. So we amended it out. We just said, no, we're not going to protect the underfloor of the I-joists. In good faith with the fire district and staying in line with Larimer County and Weld County, we're looking to put it back in. And that's going to be one of the decisions of the board. What we've done with it is we've also added 2 options. We're going to give the builder some options. And these are the same options that Larimer and Weld County use. You can either drywall the ceiling and go just as the code says, go prescriptive, or the first option is you can frame around the furnace drywall both sides and drywall the ceiling and put a self-closing door in it. Then you don't have to protect the underfloor of the joist because the problem is kind of concealed into that little room. The second one is you can frame around it, drywall both sides of the walls, and put one sprinkler head inside that furnace room with a self-closing door. What that does is we understand that there's a lot of stuff that is through that ceiling. There's pipes, there's AC condensing lines, there's flue vents, so there's all kinds of stuff, and it does make it challenging to try to drywall it. So what we've gone with the same language as Weld County and Larimer County and Fort Collins and Longmont, we've taken the same words, is that you can put one head in there, basically a P2904 system. It has to be a loop, and put one sprinkler head in there, and that would take care of the problem. So those are, you're going to see in the draft ordinance, you'll see those three options under this section.
Just for clarification, the 2904 system is not a separate sprinkler system. It's coming off of the house plumbing
Good
water
point.
supply that is already run. So it's a minimal cost. You just have your water line already run through that ceiling. You're just dropping the sprinkler head off it.
Yeah.
So the implication is having drywall just slows down that fire from consuming the floor?
You bet.
Like by,
If you went with a UL probably file, one layer of 1/2 inch is going to give it about a 30-minute protection. Yeah. Just enough time for them to know there's a problem down there and take care of it.
And a lot of when you talk about like firewall or fire separators, that's what you're doing. It's not to save the building, it's really to just give the people inside time to get out.
Correct.
So it's a lot of when you talk about the building, you say, well, you can do a sprinkler or you can build your fire related assemblies, and we don't care what you do.
Just got to give them some options. Because, you know, when this first came out, there was a real ruckus of having to drywall the ceiling of an unfinished basement. And when you do go to finish it, you got to pull it all off because you need electrical and ductwork and all the other stuff. So this just gives them an option. If they can still drywall it, I mean, if they want. That's still in the code. We're not taking it out. And just so that you know, we're not removing the fire sprinkler provision either. We're just not mandating it. Because we do have builders that do it. Hartford Homes is one of them. They put a NFPA 13D system in some of their homes for marketing. And we may see it at some point as well. The smoke detectors and then exterior deck. There's some requirements for lateral bracing from the inside of the rim on decking, and that would be impossible if the house was finished. So we made an amendment that said, unless it's got a finished basement. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff coming in the codes. PVs has been in it, but they've really cleaned it up a lot. We see a lot of PV systems on both residential and commercial. Habitable attics is a good one. I'll let you kind of talk about the habitable attic provision.
Yeah, so habitable attics has been in the code for several cycles. What this is doing is it's saying if you've exceeded, it was limited to half of the footprint of the floor below. Now you can exceed that, but if you do, because now they're building the, more of kind of what the Gamble type truss, like a barn style truss, pushing that floor out further. If you do, they just consider it another floor above grade. So if you already have a first and second floor and now you're using the attic, it would be considered a third floor to the house. So that's essentially what
And it's not a huge issue because the residential code allows up to 3 stories. So it's just, you don't even notice it, but it's basically a finished attic.
3 stories above grade, you can still have a basement below grade as long as more than 50% of the wall surface of the foundation is below grade. So if you take that, like it's a 9-foot high wall, if more than half of that average all the way around the perimeter is below grade level, it's still considered below grade. You can still have 3 above that and have a 4-story house on the residential code.
Yep. The other one is a stationary storage battery systems. They're getting this in here because we're seeing electric cars. So when we see all these battery charging systems in garages, there's now an area that we can enforce too. So we can enforce ventilation and we can enforce how they're situated in the garage. Unvented crawl spaces. This one has been in the code for a little while. They've just modified it. They're adding a dehumidification system.
Let's go back to that battery story, battery charging station. Does that apply to just new construction or current?
It would actually allow us to regulate if somebody wanted to put a charging system in their existing home. Absolutely.
Any new installation, whether the house is new or the house is existing.
Yep.
And we're seeing them on solar systems as well, where they'll store power to be able to run even on a cloudy day, and also and some of these whole house storage batteries are massive. And, just the hazard of having that inside a structure, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed with that.
What's nice about this, Ken, is that a lot of these provisions were in the mechanical code, but they were hard to enforce to a residential because the mechanical code is commercial. So we had a lot of arguments that how can we enforce that? That's a commercial requirement. Now it's in the residential, so now it just, some of the stuff isn't new, it's just located in areas that we can enforce now.
Those batteries are a bit of a fire hazard.
Absolutely.
And I'm guessing sprinklers won't work on it. It's electric.
It's not mandated to sprinkler them, but ventilation is huge.
You can put water on a battery fire. Or is it-
I don't think you would. Yeah. Typically, if they're located in garages, and garages wouldn't be required to be sprinkled normally, but yeah, it's a good point.
You would have the fire separation between the house and the garage.
Yeah.
To try to contain it within the garage.
If
Yeah.
it's not,
I'm sorry.
it's a vehicle charger, but if it's the solar panel storage, it might be in the basement.
Well, typically they're required to still be located
Are
in the
they?
garage, yeah.
I was gonna ask again about the battery storage. I don't have a ZEV car, today.
Right.
My neighbor does, but I haven't been over to his garage to see. So when you get one, a Nissan Leaf or a Tesla or whatever, when you purchase the vehicle, does it come with it? Do you also haul home a charger? How do you get power from the house to the vehicle? Is it a cord that just goes between a regular 110, 220, or whatever?
Of what I've seen, it comes with a cord, yes, but the plug would have to be wired per the National Electric Code. Yeah.
Most of them will charge up to 110, but it takes a lot longer. So most people that buy it will do the 220, is my understanding.
Where you're probably going to see the batteries in a garage is on the Teslas. They do have a different charging system. They're not just a plug-in type.
Rapid charging.
Right. They're a little bit more high-tech.
I guess my question is, is the code gonna start mandating a 220 in the garage then?
No, we're not going to mandate it. We just have, if somebody wants to do it, we have something to regulate it. Yeah, no. I did hear that Boulder County does. A friend of mine just built a house there, and it's mandatory to do geothermal. Every house has to have electric car charging and solar. Those are the three things. Mandatory. Yeah.
I just heard from a speaker who put in an outdoor kitchen, and he had to do offsets. So he had to put up like a solar panel on his house. He was doing, like any construction, environmental offset.
Yep. Yeah, it's getting, we're not going that far yet. Dryer exhaust ducts, there, a lot of people, anyone in the mechanical business has seen a 4-inch duct, dryer duct, put in a 3.5-inch wall, and they just squish it, and they get it in there. The code now regulates a lot of that, so. And then, commercial cooking. Commercial cooking equipment is now allowed in residential insulation as long as it's been completed by an engineer. This, you're going to see, it's slowly getting in there from really bigger homes. In the 2012 was the first time that we saw that if you have a fan above an appliance in a kitchen that's over 600 CFM, you had to bring in makeup air. So we're starting to see, and that's still in the code today, we're starting to see large commercial appliances used in larger homes. So they're regulating them.
So then, that exhaust fan would suck out too much air.
Yeah,
They're pulling out too much air, and they're causing the furnace and the water heater to not operate properly.
It actually backdrafts because you're pulling so much and creating so much negative pressure in the house that it's drawing that carbon dioxide from the fluid, pulling it into the house instead of allowing it to draft. So there's been several.
So you got to have makeup air to bring air back into the house. Yeah.
What's that? Yeah, those big 48-inch, you know.
You have the phone?
If you don't watch out, it'll suck your ball cap up when you're cooking.
So some of the appendix chapters, one that I didn't see in here, Scott, was home daycares. Was that one that we wanted to look at? That was one of them that we had originally talked about. Radon methods. Right now, a lot of the municipalities that we're giving the same presentation to is not mandating the full radon system. What I think that is a decision on a board is, do we mandate putting the under slab to a T above and then if there is a high reading, they can mitigate it from there. And that's, I'm going to say right now, 70% maybe of the builders do that today, but it's not a mandatory requirement. So basically they put a pipe under the slab and put a T in it, and then they cap it. Yeah.
What that does is it prevents them, if they're going to install it later, from having to bust up the slab in the basement. You know, it's $50 worth of pipe to throw into the slab before they pour it, rather than bust the slab out and put it in later. But
Yeah, but it's a board call. It's not a, I think we're going to see more and more of it, and from what I hear from realtors around here, and Gail, you probably know, there's high readings in Windsor. There's actually quite a few high readings.
80% of the properties that are tested are high.
Yeah, yeah. The alternative is what they do is they take a 4-inch core drill and they just drill down and stick a pipe in it. So they suck it from the slab, and it does a little bit, I mean, it does help, but if we can get the mitigation under the slab, it's a better system. Yeah.
Keep all the windows open year round.
Yeah, or live in an older home that's drafty. Patty covers, it's currently in there today. But there was also a provision that we were going to talk about home daycares. And there's a home daycare chapter. The reason that we talked about it is because it conflicts with the state. The state allows 12 kids to be regulated by 2 adults, by 2 supervisors, so 6 kids each. The IRC regulates that at 5 kids, 1 person for 5. So it's down a little bit. This is just something that if you guys see an issue that you've had with daycares.
It's not so much an issue with daycares as it's a consistency with our municipal code. We have a small group in daycare limit, I believe, of 8, that relates back to the state requirements.
Okay.
We just want to make sure that we're consistent.
Okay.
So 8, does that include the provider, or is that one provider with 8 kids?
It's 8 kids.
8 kids plus the provider.
Yeah.
All right, so that matches the language of our amendment was 9 total.
Was
including
9.
the provider.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah.
The daycare, are you talking about someone doing this in their home or a commercial operation?
Home. This is home daycare only. Yep. If it's a commercial, it's regulated out of the International Building
I
Code.
think I know the answer, I just want to check. Daycare expenses are a big issue. Commerce one of the highest expenses.
Oh, yeah.
I think it has more to do with state regulation and licensing. Is there anything in the building code that's adding to the high expense of daycare in Colorado?
Are you talking about commercial or home daycare?
I think it's all commercial.
Really, right now, without adopting an appendix chapter, you have to rely on the town code or the state. Yep. Yep. So, yeah, in 2013 to 2015, there were 109,000 fires in multifamily units and 405 deaths. That's the reason that we're asking, is it important? You know, now we're starting to see statistics of townhomes. So, like I said, we make recommendations. The board has the final decision because we want a code that is good for Windsor, that's good for the people. We've already had a few municipalities that have said, no, they don't want to sprinkle townhomes. That's fine. That's a board decision. Yeah.
Is that a Colorado statistic or a national?
This is a national. Yep. So that, as we get later on, you're going to see some of the decisions that we're looking for the board. Really not many changes. As you look through the mechanical, the fuel gas, and the plumbing code, there are a few things in the residential code, plumbing section, and the IPC that we're going to talk about here in a little bit that I think we need to make amendments to.
guessing that as you have these units side by side, there's a significant fire break between the units.
There is. Yep.
Say these 25 deaths, were they just in the unit or did it spread?
Yeah, so what happened, what I found researching it was that because we don't mandate sprinkler in townhomes, we changed that separation between townhomes. It used to be 1 hour, but it assumed that the townhome was sprinkled because it was mandatory. When we removed the sprinkler requirement, we added a 2 hour. So we made, in the 2012 adoption, we said you either have a 2 hour separation or 2 1 hour separations. So if we do decide to sprinkle these, we'll go back to the 1 hour. The problem is that the separation is between units and not on the front and back of the unit. There's no fire separation on the front or rear. So if the code requires it to be separated from the foundation to the roof. Yep.
And
So.
they would use fire retardant treated, if they don't run a parapet past the roof line, then the sheathing that's on the roof has to be a fire retardant treated plywood that goes onto the roof with 4 feet
Yep.
minimum each direction to help try to keep it jumping over the wall. The one
Yep.
thing that sprinklers do is you'll actually have a sprinkler head on the outside towards the patio that would cover like these grill fires and things like that. It keeps it from spreading along the back of the house to another unit.
Yep. If you went out of the, like apartments, out of the IBC, let's just say the fire code, it's even in the IBC, in Chapter 9, apartments are mandatory to be sprinkled. They have to be. And that includes decks. So they took that into consideration. That's been in the code for some time. So if you have an apartment complex, any type of situation where you have one unit over the top of the other, it's regulated out of the building code and it's mandatory to be sprinkled. And so is the patio. So we're just looking at, you know, when that fire flares up on the patio, it can go around the corner. It can, because it's unprotected. So just.
And the fire district is very supportive of sprinklering.
Of course. Yeah.
They don't get the water loss calls.
That's right. You know, one thing, oh, go ahead, Gail.
I just had a quick comment. I just think, in my opinion, any attached dwelling units should be sprinkled. I mean, you have people living in close proximity, and that can jump from unit A to B to C so quickly. So to me, that just makes sense.
That's a good point, Gail. I mean, and the board could do that. They could say, we haven't made that recommendation for duplexes, but you could. You could say, hey, only single-family dwellings aren't sprinkled. One, you know, the two-family dwellings are. Sure. Yeah.
Anything that has a column.
The problem is, I say that when you have a sprinkler outside, then we're gonna have to use a glycol system.
You could use a glycol, or you could use a system, a dry system that it kicks on as soon as the head's activated. But yeah, you're right. It would be glycol most likely. The one thing that I didn't tell you, that I may have missed in the IRC, is we also made an amendment for a really silly exception that they put in the IRC. They say they had an exception for egress windows in basements that if you had a sprinkled home, you don't need an egress window in a basement bedroom. That's silly. Sorry. So we amended that out. I don't care if you sprinkle it or not, every room is going to have an egress window because, don't ask me how this got into the code hearings, it's the smoke that's going to get them, and they need to be rescued. It's not just the fire. So what, go ahead.
Another thing that kind of plays into that is that if a fire gets up into an attic, the way the trusses are built, those metal plates, the heat causes them to curl, the truss collapses, and now you have the structure starting to collapse in on itself. So you have to have a means of getting out and escaping the structure if the upper levels have collapsed. So that's another aspect of just providing. And the amendment that they put in the code did still require one egress out of the basement, but it just didn't have to be in the bedroom. It could be out of the main room.
Yeah, no.
And yeah, it's just not safe.
Yeah. So now we're at the energy code.
Can we zoom in?
What I did was I compared the 6, the 9, the 12, the 15, and the 18. This will be a board decision as well. We're leaning towards the 12, but if you look, when you look at the fenestration factors, the higher, this is the fenestration U factor is for windows and doors. It's how fast heat can transfer through that glass. The higher the number, the worse the window. So right now, we see a lot of homes today with a .29 window. That's a good window. The minimum is .35 in the 2009 is what we enforce today, and then it drops to .32 across the board. As you look, you'll see that the skylight U factor drops a little bit to .55, and the ceiling R value jumps from 38 to 49. So it does increase. What I want to talk about here, though, is there's still 3 methods to comply. There's prescriptive, so if you want to submit a set of plans and give us a window schedule and show us that you comply with this, you're good. Or you can do what's called a UA trade-off, which is a res check. So Department of Energy publishes a program for both residential and commercial. It's called res check and com check. You can manipulate these numbers in the program. You just have to come up with a final button when you say check to see if it complies. It's got to say yes. What I'm saying there is that you could put a .29 window in, or better. I mean, I've not seen one better, but I think .29 is the best. You could go to an R38 in the attic instead of an R49, and you could put an R19 in your exterior walls instead of an R17. And so you can increase components of the thermal envelope and still get it to pass under res check.
Well, you were talking about the energy trade-offs. That's what you do essentially. You steal from one, you give to another. Overall, it achieves the same compliance.
It's still allowed in the 12. Yeah, go ahead.
So, those trade-offs, if I was a home builder, depending on the design of the home, orientation of the home?
Yeah, like if you had a ceiling structure that wasn't tall enough to achieve an R49 insulation value within that structure on like a vaulted ceiling, then you may reduce that insulation in that, but maybe you put in better windows or you increase the wall or the floor insulation to compensate.
Or west facing versus north facing walls, or how many windows?
The UA trade-off will do that, Ken, yes. So it does care about the direction that the house is going. You do stipulate that when you start the program, because you do get more of a heat factor if the back of your house is all glass and it's getting sun.
Designs might be more.
You bet.
So the flexibility would allow a home builder to look at orientation, design, and adjust accordingly.
You bet. The third one is Energy Rater. So you can still get a HERS rating. You can have Energy Logic do an energy rating on your home, which a lot of builders do for marketing purposes. They'll get a HERS value. What that does is the 2 asterisks on the 15 and the 18. Those asterisks are mandatory for blower door testing, duct tightness testing, and commissioning of the appliances. Those 3 things alone are anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400 increase in cost for every home, without doing any increase in energy efficiency. That's just testing. So the one thing that, the one thing that I did when I really looked hard at this was I took some of our national and our local builders that build a lot, and I took some of the worst products that they have, and I ran it. So I ran it under the 12 energy code. I could get them to pass, barely. But they have to make some modifications, but I could get them to pass.
Just curious, sir, on the 13 plus 5, what does that mean versus 20?
So the 13 plus 5 means the 20, if you slide over, I explained it a little bit. Yeah. So the first value is continuous insulation, and the second one is cavity. Or the first value is cavity, the second is continuous. So what that is saying is that you could have an R13 in the walls and then put exterior insulated sheeting on the outside. This is kind of a strange one, because when you look over, it says, if you look at the 18 and the 15 and the 12, it says a 20. Well, there's no R20 out there. So what we're doing is we allow an R19 insulation, which is going to be a 2x6 wall, or you could do an R13, or you could do an R13 plus 5 on the outside sheeting, and then we also take into consideration the drywall. So the drywall has a slight factor as well.
So are you suggesting the 2012? But how does that go into Ken's where they can adjust? Do they have to at least be at 2012? Or?
Oh, no, you could, I mean, if anyone could, you could run a res check, or you could build to the 15 or 18, and you're still in compliance. Yeah, is that what you're saying?
Lower?
Cannot build lower.
Okay.
No.
Is it what if they can't pass the res check with lower? Or?
Res check, and I didn't know this, but one of our plans examiners told me that you can't even pick 09 as an option because it's gone in the res check program. So, and I said, well, how are all these guys complying? And he said that they're all shifting their numbers around and complying with the 2012 today.
So, let me ask this, Russ. So you said that there's a bill going right now that says we have to be using 3 codes?
Correct.
So assuming that gets adopted, in 3 years from now, we're gonna have to go to the 12.
Or the 15, yeah.
Right, so I'm just saying, are we benefited from going to 12 now, or could we say?
The only reason that we made that opinion is that we're cognizant of the increase of cost. There's a good market right now. We don't want to jack costs up to the point, but we also want to increase energy efficiency. So we could, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could adopt the 15 code as well.
I mean, if it gets adopted, then it's gonna, unless it gets repealed in some place, it'll be perennial, right? So every 3 years, you have to go through that code adoption.
Not the entire code adoption. You could just make an amendment to the energy code, yeah.
But still, though, you're
Sure.
going through, you're saying now we have 2015.
Yep.
So,
The 2021 codes are already in the works right now.
yeah, so I mean, I just wondered, I guess it's something that I'd like you to at least contrast a little bit for the board and kind of pro con, whether we did the 15 or the 18. What would that really mean to the builder and the homeowner versus every 3 years going through and viewing the codes again?
The one thing that we could do is we could adopt the 15, or we could adopt the 18 codes for this matter, and maybe we amend out the commissioning of the appliances. But that's going to mandate duct blaster testing and blower door testing. Which, is it a good thing? I mean, that's a call. It's a hard one for building departments because historically, building departments look at life safety issues, and the energy code is not life safety. It's more sustainability, you know. It's a good thing. It's not, I'm not saying it's not good, but it's a decision that I think every municipality needs to see how high do they want to go in energy efficiency and at what cost.
Is there any way to calculate, I think you said it would increase the cost of the home like $14, $15.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, amortized over 30 years, that versus my energy savings. That's how I would want to look at it as a consumer. I don't know if we have models of that or not.
We can get those for you. Yeah, I don't have them tonight.
But just in general, I mean, it might be better for the homeowner to go ahead with the higher standards because you're going to save on energy. I don't know.
Those numbers are really skewed, and it's really hard because I've had people that have said, hey, I built the tightest, best home I could do, and I've seen no increase in lowered costs. And then you get other people that say, well, I've seen a slight decrease in my costs. So I know.
Are you saying that the asterisk really means that there's additional testing required? It's not that you're building a more energy efficient home. You just have to run tests.
What the commissioning does is it dials in the equipment. It tests the equipment to make sure that it is set at the standards that was originally designed, whether it's, yeah. So, I mean, in Colorado, we have to be careful because we have high altitude requirements for adjusting of appliances. So, yeah, that's what that does, is it commissions them and it basically just says, yes, it's running the way that it was designed for.
So like in big commercial projects, I mean, your facility is not commissioning your stuff because it's, you get a $600,000 HVAC unit on your roof. You want to know that it works like Train said it would. It's just not as common on single family homes.
Right.
What I saw with the blower test, if they fail the test, so then they have to go back, and they might have to seal up the house better, do some things differently, then they'll have to run the test again until they pass. So,
Yeah, what they do, I mean, even today, we require that attic accesses be gasketed. That's a code requirement because it's part of the air barrier. The way the 09 states is that you don't have to have a blower door test done if during the inspection you can determine that it's been caulked and sealed. And when we do an insulation inspection, they foam everything, you know. So we make sure that every hole in the exterior of the wall is sealed. What the blower door does, if you're not familiar with it, it's a piece of equipment that's put on the front door. And it has a and it basically, it pulls it, yeah. So it's pulling air out of the house, and it determines how much air is leaking out of that thermal envelope. And the way they do that is if it is leaking too much, they have a little smoker. And they go around and they look at the receptacle outlets, and they can see where it's pulling air from those receptacle outlets
So
normally.
I've done those blower door tests, and what it is, it's a frame with canvas on it that's stretched to fit the size of the front door. The fan is set to run to try to maintain a 50 pascal negative draw on the house. I've seen houses that were so drafty that you couldn't achieve that because the fan was just spinning as fast as it could go, it wouldn't maintain the negative pressure. But then, based on the size, the volume of air inside the house, your square footage times your ceiling height, then you can calculate based on how fast that fan is spinning, how many square feet of leakage you actually have on the perimeter surface of the home.
So you were saying before though, we could exempt out some of that testing. So what could we, eliminate from a higher code versus what would still be there? What would it just be, the R ratings or what would still
No, I don't think we would want to mess with any of the R values on here because the way that statute is written is that you're going to have to adopt, every municipality is going to have to adopt a energy code of the last 3 newest cycles, equal or better. So I think even if we say, well, let's adopt the 18 energy code and amend out the commissioning of the appliance, then maybe we'll still go with the blower door and the duct blaster testing.
So, and the 3 methods are available today, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like this is a new way to test energy efficiency, because under today's code, we've adopted the 2009, and you still have the option of the res check, the blower door test, or the prescriptive. It's just a matter of if we adopt the 2012, now those 3 options are still available. You just meeting a higher standard.
Yeah, what the 12 still says is that if your ducts don't leave the thermal envelope, you don't have to have duct blaster testing, because if they leak, they're leaking inside the thermal envelope. Meaning if all your ducts are running under the floor in the basement, if they leak, they're still inside your thermal envelope. If they leave and go outside to your garage, even the 09 today says you have to have a duct blaster test done because they're outside of the thermal envelope.
It looks like on your table, the only difference between 12, 15, and 18 is the U factor.
Really, the only difference between the 12, the 15, and the 18 is that the 15 and 18 is mandate to have those 3 commissioning, duct blaster. So so the 2 with the asterisks, it's mandated in there that you have duct blaster, but I think everything else is for the most part the same.
Well, the 18 drops to 0.3.
Oh, yeah, 0.30, okay, yeah. And like I said, I don't think that's a huge factor because we see 0.29 today. So that's really a board decision. I mean, I'd be happy to, if you guys want more information,
Oh, don't ask that question.
Okay, I withdraw that.
Because it'll elicit a bunch of questions.
We could adopt 18 and take out those requirements, the testing, right?
I think you could. I can check and see. I think it really depends on what this bill does at the state.
If they say or better, same or better,
If they say
you might have to
equal.
add something else to offset it.
I think we could because the 12 does not mandate it, and if we take those out, we're still one of the top 3 codes. That way, if we do get to where the 12 drops off, we may have to make a re-amendment to require the testing. So,
How many houses fail the test? Is it like 90% pass, so it's a waste of effort?
you know, we don't really get involved with that, so I'm not really sure what the answer to that is.
Most new homes that I've seen, just talking to the guys out there in the field that do those energy tests, because even though it's not required or mandated, a lot of the larger home builders are doing it.
Mhm.
And, you know, because it's still an option. And most houses are passing, you know, they're building houses tight enough now, it's not really an issue. It's the older homes that would be an issue.
And could you guys poll like the local builders? That was like, where you just check and see, you know, how many local builders are doing that?
Yeah,
Would be good to know
we
if
could do
it's a
that.
test that 80% of our builders already do. Maybe it's not as cumbersome as, you know.
I'm pretty sure my house said it's 3 years old, 4 years old.
Yeah, so it depends on the builder. I mean, there's a lot of builders out there that they just do an energy rater just for marketing purposes. So they do all of this, and you get a HERS
Probably
rating.
right, David. I would venture to guess you didn't buy a Journey home. Or some of our other big builders in town that, you know, that may be a point that they need to be tested since
Yeah.
they go up pretty close.
But, so I'm curious in that, because you mentioned that you had kind of tested these against the existing builders around this community.
Mhm.
And that all of them would pass somehow, probably.
We took the worst case scenario and got it to pass.
So we're doing that with respect to these energy things. When you talk about the other elements of the code we spoke about before, changing and adopting the newer version, is your sense that if we adopt the new version with the amendments you recommended, we're not really placing an additional burden on the current development construction industry?
I think it is slightly. If you go to the 15 or 18, it is increasing cost slightly, yeah. But not drastically. I mean,
That's through the higher quality windows and things like that.
mhm. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Shane, I can do that. I can kind of ask around and see, because like I said, the builders today, they comply with the 2012. And I think a lot of them may already comply with the 15. So, I don't think when we start surveying the builders, other than a few, I don't think you're going to see much resistance, because for marketing purposes, they're already in tune. They want an energy efficient home. They really do. Yeah.
Yeah, because no one wants to spend $400,000 or $500,000 to buy a house that their electric bill is going to be $300 a month. So,
Yeah. It's a competitive market. I mean, right now, you got to have some edge, and that's the energy code is one of them.
There's one thing you'll see in a slide later, because you'll notice right here for the basement R value, from the 09 column, it was 13 continuous. That's when they put the blanket insulation on the foundation wall, continuous insulation, or 17 in the stud framing. On the 2012, it jumped up to 15 continuous or 19 in the framing. And because there's so many houses that have been built under the 2009 energy code, if they go to finish the basement and it's after the date when the 18 goes into effect, we're not going to require them to rip out that insulation or add more insulation. Same as what we did with the egress windows. If it met code 6 months ago or 2 years ago when they built the house, we're not going to make them add extra insulation just because they're finishing the basement a couple years later.
And keep in mind, that's prescriptive. If you did the UA trade-off or the energy rater, you could still do something different. Yeah.
Any more questions on this, or?
Don't ask them. Just let's go to the next one. So, commercial energy code, again, this was based on the 12. If we go to the higher one, we may not be able to delete the commissioning of the appliances. So this PowerPoint was based on adopting the 12. And then you'll see that the energy code, basement wall insulation values from R15 to R19, blower door testing, insulation requirements to allow existing structures. So we did make some amendments for existing homes wanting to finish their basement. International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, we have to adopt this one now. This is a new code. All of the pool requirements have been removed from the IRC and the IBC. They're all gone. The same requirements, they didn't change. The same barrier requirements are in the pool and spa code. What is nice about the pool and spa code is it added another a way of protecting kids from drowning. Currently, right now, and I'll lay this out really quickly. Currently, under the code, and it's the same code, it has not changed, that if you have an in-ground pool in your backyard, you need a minimum 4-foot barrier around it, but we allow a 6-foot fence to do that. If the back of your home is part of that barrier, which it always is, the code requires the back door to be alarmed, so that anyone going out that back door, the alarm goes off. But I'm going to tell you right now, after you let the dog out 20 times, that buzzer's gone. I'm just being a realist. I mean, they disarm it. So what are we really doing? What are we really doing? What's nice about the new pool and spa code is it allows for an automatic lockable pool cover as part of the barrier. It is nice. It's an ASTM cover, so it has to meet a certain ASTM standard. Basically, you can walk across it. Most of the pool installers today include that with the pool. They do. So now you've got a lockable automatic pool cover that ultimately, we all know pools are a hazard. It's an adult supervision. If they're not, anything can happen. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that an automatic pool cover is going to save lives. It probably will, but it may not. So this is a slippery slope. So yeah, and anyone that's been here long enough knows that we had a kid that drowned here 3 or 4 years ago, in Windsor, for just silly reasons. And that provision is still in the code today. It says if you have an above-ground pool and the sidewall is 48 inches or taller, as long as you have a removable ladder or lockable ladder, that meets the barrier requirement. What happened a few years ago was that the ladder was removed, but it was leaned against the pool. And the kid went up, looked in, the ladder fell away, and nobody knew what happened. So that's what I mean. This is a good code. Nothing has changed. Everything that we enforce today is in the pool and spa code, but it is a new code that we need to adopt.
And those covers do work. They're designed to the same rating as what they have right now for hot tub covers as far as the weight rating. But it's when you have a 6-foot hot tub versus a 20-foot pool, it's harder to achieve that weight rating. But it's designed actually to where if a child runs out onto the pool, it'll also hold an adult going out there to get them and bring them back. So the weight rating is high enough. And I've actually done jumping jacks on the center of some of these, and it didn't go anywhere. So it'll hold me doing jumping jacks. It's pretty substantial.
Where we've seen a challenge with this, where the automatic covers will come into play, is on the state lots. When we require like a 2.5-acre lot and we require a barrier around it, the HOAs go ballistic. And it's like we can override the HOAs, but all the neighbors complain that say, really, we got an ugly chain link fence around the pool in the backyard. So the automatic pool cover will eliminate some of that arguments as well.
Some of that's commercial pools.
Yeah. So here's really the decisions, mandate sprinklers in townhomes, amend the sprinkler for 1 and 2. Maybe we just do single family, like Gail said. That's an excellent choice. It's completely a board decision. One thing that we did miss that I didn't see a slide of was the reclaimed water. We need to make a decision on that. Our recommendation is to delete it in its entirety. So there's 2 codes in Colorado that we can't really mess with, and that's the electrical code and the plumbing code. Those are state codes. The state plumbing board did allow for municipalities to opt out of the gray water. If you do not opt out and you allow these, and I'll explain what they are, if you do allow gray water systems, you have to comply with a standard set at the state level, almost like a wastewater treatment plant. I mean, it's very tedious. You have to have annual inspections and testing and all this stuff. What it is it's like a 30-gallon tank in your basement that collects water from sinks, showers, I think your washing machine. Yeah. And it all goes into this system, and when it's full, the rest of it diverts back into your sewer, so you don't see a difference. But when this thing's full, it's sanitized, and it's got chemicals, and it uses ultraviolet lights it gets the hair, it cleans this thing, and then it supplies the water to your stools. So in theory, they say it can save up to 30% of your water bill, which kind of makes sense, but the maintenance on these things is extreme. And the last thing that we want is for Windsor to be on the news that a kid or a dog has some sort of bacteria. It's a very tedious program. I think I sent you the sections of the code that they're welcome to look at, but it's about a 19-page document of what the municipality would have to comply with if they wanted to go with gray water systems. Yeah, Victor, you may know more about them. Yeah, they're just not there yet. They're just not there. There's only a handful of listed appliances, UL listed, but the testing on them is tedious.
Are there any other municipalities that have allowed those to go?
Not yet. None of ours. No, they're all, they just say pass that one, pass that sign.
Russ, if you took these to our fire department, maybe you have, I mean, the ones that pertain to fire, the sprinklers and slower alternative fire protection, what were they?
The fire district?
Yeah, they already said.
I've talked to the fire marshal, and Sandra, yeah, she's all on board with the townhomes. We didn't really talk about the duplex, but guarantee you she'll smile.
Yeah.
Yeah, she smiles at that kind of stuff.
You haven't really addressed it, but I want to bring it up for some thinking about. Several of us were in the water literacy class. And last week, we had a brief presentation from a developer, home builder, about water efficiency homes. And so it was a short presentation, but apparently there's a lot of things that can go into the construction of a home that is much more water efficient. And I don't know if that plays in the future in our codes or at all, so it's just
Okay.
a topic to think about.
Sure. I know that a lot of the codes now have gone to 1.4 flush, toilets. They're really low. Sometimes you got to flush them twice, but hey, But they do. They have limited the amount of gallons per flush. Low flow water heads for your showers, things of that nature. But yeah.
Construction, the location of your hot water tank, or even the instant hot water versus hot water tanks, had implications on the type of plumbing, and it seemed like there's a lot of ideas out there.
Well, that is part of the new energy code. You're going to see that if your hot water lines, I think if they go more than 10 feet, they have to be insulated. So a lot of that stuff, it tries to keep that water more hot and at a longer distance so that you don't have to keep the water on so long. So there are things like that that are going to be required in the 15 and 18 codes. Yeah.
15, 18 code bill.
You bet.
And that's pretty much efficiency of existing technologies.
In new construction, yeah. Yeah. Yep. So these are kind of and fire protection of floors. So these are really, there's not a whole lot. It's a really good code. It is. If you looked at, when I first got it, I got a copy of the significant changes, and it's like 4 pages. And when I started looking into it, the significant changes were word changes to the same code sections to help us interpret the code better. They weren't code changes. So it was a really good, there was only a handful of things that really, in my opinion, had an impact on construction. The code is the same as we're enforcing today. I think it's a better code, to be honest with you. But these are the things that I think you guys need to ponder over and have a discussion and kind of come back, and we'll work with Scott on how we get them into the ordinance.
So Dr. Jones had asked about running that by the fire marshal, the captain. That last point on the floor alternatives, and that was the one where the drywall ceiling.
They'll love that.
They're okay with those?
Oh, yeah.
3 options?
Yeah, because it's more of a protection than we had in the 2009 or 12. Yep.
Mirrors what Will County, Laramie County, all of the other larger cities in the area are doing as well.
I'd like to suggest one additional consideration for safety of window wells, particularly deep window wells. In our subdivision, we've got oversized window wells to 6 feet deep. And a few years back, ironically, an inspector tripped over the edge of the window well, fell in and was killed. Also with our subdivision, we've got houses that are as close as 7 feet. So then when you have window wells that are 3 feet out and offsetting, you can see the problem that particularly at dusk or dawn, folks going through there, and in our case again from the street to the beach, it seems like an incredible hazard. And as I understand it, the current code only requires a cover if the window well is within 5 feet of the door. But when you've got a street on one side and the beach on the other, you know, people are gonna be going through there. And when there's such a potential, we know it is a real safety hazard, and then you add children, grandchildren running around, and there's no requirement for those deep window wells to be covered. It suggests that maybe that ought to be reconsidered.
Sure. I mean, that would be something that we can work with Scott on. This has came up before, it's nothing new, because Windsor has a 5-foot, they have a 5-foot minimum setback. So when you put a 36-inch window well on the side, you have 2 feet of walking surface, you know. The current code today, and we have amendments for it that say, hey, if you have a flat walking surface, whether it's a patio or sidewalk, that is within 36 inches of a window well that's deeper than 36 inches, it has to have a guard or protected, because it's intended to walk there. It's really hard to regulate grass. So somebody says, well, I was walking on the grass and I fell into my window well, you know. It's a great discussion, though. I mean, it's, yeah.
Again, code is a minimum standard, so if there's nothing prohibiting you from installing one, if the homeowner or whoever were to desire that, it's just at the minimum level, it wouldn't be required under the current code.
Yeah, probably in our subdivision, there's probably, most of them are covered, but there's probably 40 uncovered window wells. And I just think, okay, 40 6-foot holes over the next 100 years that the house is going to be there. What's the chance that a kid's going to fall into it?
You know, that's a great point, and maybe, you know, it may lead into what Scott's going to talk about. He's going to talk about a preferred builder, some regulations. Maybe that's one of them that we add in there and say, hey, you protect all your window wells that are deeper than a certain distance, you know.
Yeah, although that would be more of a life safety upgrade, I don't know that would be, I think it's more, I think that's something that you either do or don't.
So it's always been an issue, especially with small setback requirements, because the setbacks have gotten 5 feet and the window wells have gotten bigger. So even getting a lawnmower around 2 feet, if you're tight to it, I mean, it's tough. Yeah.
We've got houses from wall to wall that are 7 feet apart. So in some instances.
What subdivision are you in?
I'm sorry?
What subdivision are you in?
Harper Walk.
Oh, yeah. I know.
When you've got window wells that are 3 to 3.5 feet wide, and people are wandering back and forth between houses, oftentimes visiting friends or kids running, it just doesn't make sense.
Well, maybe it's something that we have a discussion on to say if there's a certain distance, you know, if there's a certain, it's obviously it's going to be hard to regulate every window well that's deep.
Well, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
if you've got a 1 lot or a 1 acre lot, yeah, it doesn't make
Yeah.
much sense. But if you've got a 5,000 square foot lot, you
Yeah.
know, or 7,000.
Maybe we should just look at like putting something in like the next county newsletter or something. Just thinking, you know, like your subdivision is built out, none of this would be retroactive for anybody, so, you know, we're really just talking about new residential builds. But it is a good kind of life safety tip, and I think maybe
Yeah.
we could put a note in, just encourage people to do that.
And there are a couple of subdivisions like
I
that.
didn't want to get wildlife in mine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, equal rabbits.
Yeah.
snakes.
Well, there, I know there's your subdivision and the one on the other side that had a 3-foot minimum setback, so there's 6 foot between homes.
I can certainly see for the future that, in an effort to increase density overall, make better use of the space, that it will be happening again.
I think it's something we'll have to look at. We obviously don't want to create a one-size-fits-all that doesn't address all other types of subdivisions, but it's definitely a good point to take into account and discuss what our options might be. So, I'm sorry. Did
I
you?
had 2 quick questions on this discussion. In our packet, there was some information about soil and concrete foundations. Was that a change? And then the other question was, it was something about plastic gas pipelines being 18 inches. And I was wondering if that was a change.
It's not a change, no. That's it. That we incorporated all those amendments. The code before said 12 inches, and we kept it at 18.
So it is 18, so my neighbor starts digging.
Yep.
What was said about the soil and the concrete foundations?
Well, I think this is going to be one that you're going to talk about, Scott, about the preferred builder. I think we're talking about the soil compaction. Is
Well,
it
I think, yeah, that might be part of this, I don't know.
soil compaction and then, reinforcement of driveways and concrete, so yeah.
So that's coming.
That's coming.
So yeah, the first item in this memo was the adoption of the building code, which these guys have covered very well. I just wanted to kind of cap the first item with, so staff hasn't done the outreach to the building community yet, or the Northern Colorado Home Builders Association. That would be our next step. We wanted to get the town board and planning commission's direction tonight before we just go forward and stir up any questions. We want to make sure that that's the direction the town board and planning commission want to go. But that would be our next step, is to send out a draft of the ordinance and notice to all of the builders that we normally do business with, reach out to the HBA. And, but before we do that, we're hoping to incorporate any input that we get from tonight's discussion regarding, say, the sprinkler requirements for any residential structures with a common wall, or it sounds like there's maybe some more discussion to be had about the energy code, or we'll bring.
Well, I don't know, I just asked a question, because if it's every 3 years, we're gonna have to update it anyway, I just don't know if there's a big benefit to the town in waiting, and just go through it every 3 years.
Right.
Versus being a little bit ahead.
Yeah, unless the 21 code comes out and it's just an awesome code, we're going to skip it again. So I'll be retired, I won't be doing this again.
But exactly, yeah, so your plan, I mean, we're really 6 years from now before we do this again. So are we better off at least getting up to the 15 code, so we're not?
I think with that new bill going through, you're better off adopting the 18 or the 15. And if you're going to adopt the 15, you might as well adopt the 18 because it's just a similar. There's not much difference.
And we think the likelihood of it passing is pretty high.
Yeah, from what I hear, it's moving pretty quickly.
I guess that's one of the key things, ask the Builders Association and
Right.
get feedback, especially if we can carve out the testing as a
Yep.
mandatory.
What I'll do is I'll reach out to some of the builders and say, hey guys, run your home that you built today on the 18 code. You can pick it in the energy, in the res check. Run it and see what happens. Yeah.
The gentleman's concerns about the window wells. Our town mandate is what, a 5-foot setback off property line? So we wouldn't have a 3.5-foot setback issue going forward.
Right.
I'm just thinking, do we need to put something in that if the setback is under 5 feet, that then it does need to be covered or something like that, so that we don't have that kind of situation happen again, and then yet we have it enforceable going forward, or do they all have to be 5 feet going forward?
I think we need to take a look at that, because I think some of the new subdivisions, like the Rain Dance with the PUD, does have some allowance for smaller setbacks, subject to obviously fire rating and the building code, but there may be other newer subdivisions that we'd also need to look at and just see how that would play into those new subdivisions. So, but definitely we will look into it and have more on that when we bring the building code back to the planning commission and town board. The, I guess the two items that sounded like we had fairly consensus on were the residential sprinklers with the common wall. Is that, I didn't,
I just go along with you.
that's what it sounded like.
Is there much data to actually go on about what it saves in fires versus what it costs in water damage from system failures? Because I know just from my experience with insuring single-family homes, and I don't know what it looks like on the townhouse side, but we actually up your premium when you have a fire sprinkler system because the odds of a water loss from it failing is so much higher than it actually preventing fire damage.
They are making better
So-
sprinkler heads now
What
where.
is the water damage from the water itself?
Well, they're just, well, not because it went off to stop the fire, but just because the system failed, a valve failed, or a false sensor caused it to go
Well,
off.
and that's one of the reasons that we're not all in on residential sprinklers right now is because if you put an NFPA 13D system in your home, it's not required to have a horn and strobe on the front of your garage, so you don't know if that thing's flowing or not. You know, there's a lot of things that, in classes that I've been at that a lot of municipalities require a horn and strobe in the front of the garage, but it's not mandated yet. So if a neighbor sees that horn and strobe going off, they're going to call the fire district, hey, you have a flow. Also, technology is changing that smartphones are going to be able to sense a flow. So you're going to get notified when you've got a flow going at your house. That's coming. I talked to Joe Jaramillo with Poudre Fire Authority. He also said that the sprinkler head technology is changing. And at some point, they're going to have a smart sprinkler head that knows at 165 degrees, it flows water, and then it senses when that heat is down and it shuts itself off. When that comes around, I think, you know, sprinklers may not be a bad thing, you know?
So maybe there's a couple of options that we put in for the town board to consider when the ordinance comes back.
I guess the one comment on it, I get the common wall, and it is certainly a concern, but I hadn't thought about the fact that you could run water on an external spout, on an external sprinkler, because it would freeze. So, is there a good solution for this common wall with a back patio type sprinkler head?
Yeah, they can use a dry system or they can use a glycol system. Dry system doesn't have water in it until it opens and activates. So when the sprinkler head activates, then that triggers the water and it flows.
But it sounds like that's a separate system then from whatever's inside the house.
It is. Have you
Yes.
ever seen a P2904 system? Is it of value to put a head on the patio of a townhome that's a P2904? What the P2904 is basically your water line comes off of your kitchen sink and then it goes up and picks up the sprinkler head. So it's off of your domestic water line. It's just a little bit different system.
It's a dry system, so once it activates, it allows that water out to that
Oh,
area.
I see.
So if you hit
It's
it,
valve inside the house.
yeah, so when it activates it because of the fire, boom, the water's there, because then it activates the inside valve.
The thing we get into though is even with the P2904s, you still have hydraulic calculations. So you still have, it's more to it than just putting a sprinkler head out there. You gotta know what's the water pressure of the home, you know, sizing of the pipe, location of these heads. There's more to it than that.
I guess I'm feeling like before I'd say, yes, we ought to do this, I'd like to get a better feel for what the expense would be, the complexity.
Like I said, Hartford Homes does have models that they put a NFPA 13D system. So they use a company called Uponor that designs it, does the hydraulic calculations, does everything for it. They have a plan that shows the spacing, and with the plan and Uponor, their cost for construction on a 2,000 square foot home is about $6,000.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but of the builders that are building townhomes in Windsor right now, are they, it seems like Landmark is already using sprinklers? No? Okay.
The other question I had was on that fire protection of the floor alternatives. You mentioned that you could not find a single case study where that was relevant. So if we don't put it exclude, take that out, is that just adding to the cost of building homes just so somebody feels warm and fuzzy at night and really does nothing?
There are national cases of that, just not local. So in the local fire authorities that Russ had pulled, that we talked to, they hadn't had experiences with it. Prior to coming here in January, I was in Virginia, and there were multiple cases of firefighters going through floors from that in the Northern Virginia area. So it has happened on a national level. It just hasn't happened locally here.
But with new construction or old construction?
New construction. Yeah,
These
construction
are
is a
only
fairly-
for I-joists. So older homes have conventional 2x8s, 2x10s. If you use those, that's an exception to this code section. This is only for I-joists.
I-joist construction has a strand of 2x3 wood on the top and bottom with a sheet of OSB plywood in the center. And so that OSB burns out quickly and the joist collapse, so that when the firefighter walks across the floor, the subfloor is still there. It looks like it's an intact floor, but it gives out underneath them.
But you're right, it is in theory a wish list.
So in addition to the alternatives that you were discussing about drywalling it or doing the furniture, there would be that other alternative of going old school and doing
2x10.
You bet.
Yeah.
The reason that I really like the enclosing of the furnace and drywall on both sides, it also takes care of another purpose, is that some of the builders that are in building in Windsor today, if you have a fuel burning appliance in an unfinished basement, it's considered an unconfined space. So you don't have to bring in combustion air. So if we require them to enclose this, they have to bring in combustion air. So it does a couple of things. When a homeowner comes in and finishes their basement in an unfinished basement that doesn't have combustion air, it's sometimes challenging. So this kind of mandates that they enclose it and bring fresh air into that room.
So out of the list of decisions, can we eliminate gray water systems from the ordinance? Just until those are more proven. Okay, so got that one covered. So I did want to just briefly talk about the other items that Ken alluded to. In my memo, it included both contractor licensing and the residential construction guidelines. And neither one of these are as fleshed out as the building code that we just talked about, because obviously staff wants more direction from planning commission and town board before we go to a lot of effort in either one of these directions. But we have had some interest from planning commission regarding contractor licensing. We have had some, I guess, complaints about potential contractors that don't hold the appropriate licenses, that are maybe doing work on basement remodels and things of that nature.
Well, Scott, it came up right with the joint meeting. I think it was the first planning commission board joint meeting that I attended.
Yeah,
We talked about contracts.
back in May or June or something like that. And so the draft, or not the draft, but the example that staff included in the packet for tonight was borrowed from the town of Timnath code. And they've gone with a program that, and I didn't have as much time this past week to contact Timnath that I hoped to.
Lay it around the hospital.
Yeah, so, but I do have some questions into them. They don't require testing. They require proof of a license that's been granted by either Loveland or Fort Collins or Greeley or another community that's done testing. And then they also require proof of the liability insurance and then an annual fee. And they keep a registration of all of the general contractors in town. And so that's probably the least onerous version of a program that I've been able to find an example of. The other end of the spectrum is having a full-blown testing regiment, and it would be a very administrative burden, and also more burdensome for the building community to have to test in Windsor as well. So I guess I didn't get a clear, view at the last meeting whether the town board, wanted staff to investigate a contractor licensing program, something that we would potentially implement. And I'm wondering if you've heard from your constituents any issues regarding unlicensed contractors or quality of workmanship that, before we put together a draft and I work with Ian on something that replicates Timnath, I just wanted to get a little bit of feedback.
Well, quality of workmanship applies to what?
Well, I guess I shouldn't have said quality of workmanship. That steps into my next item. It's more concerns about contractors that are doing work that they shouldn't be doing.
Usually like your handyman type of contractors where they don't have electrical license or plumbing licensing.
Like currently right now, somebody could come in and build a full-blown restaurant in Windsor, and they could be a homeowner. They don't even have to have a contractor license. Yep.
And roofing is a common place where you have issues, because when you have a big hailstorm roll through, everybody with a truck and ladder is suddenly a roofer. And
I are a roofer.
So the International Code Council has, and it's accepted all along the Front Range. So I know that Fort Collins accepts it. They'll accept the ICC. It's called a Class A, B, and a C license. A C is residential, B is up to 2 stories, and a C is commercial. But Fort Collins will allow an ICC contractor license along with their test that they have for all their amendments that they have. But Loveland, Longmont, they accept ICC certification for contractor licensing. They have testing facilities all over the Front Range. I think it's $200 to take a test. They're normally 60 questions. They're all open book. It does not guarantee anything other than that they're a good test taker. Really. So I mean, don't think that we're going to have a contractor licensing program that's just a catch-all. It's going to say, hey, I'm a good test taker. But it does give them a little bit more knowledge of the building codes. That's what I would say. Yeah, it's a small step. How do we, I'm not in favor of us having our own administration to do it. I think we discussed this great. How do we enforce that, or how do we monitor it?
So the Community Core software package that we track all of our building permits through, that Safe Built provides as part of their service, includes a contractor licensing module that we currently don't utilize. So it would add some administrative work for the building permit technicians. We have one in-house right now. We have one part-time assistant from Safe Built. And I think that in this year's budget request, you'll probably see a request from me to add another permit technician / support service for the new community development department.
Sounds like you're sneaking that in while the town manager's in the back.
Yeah, I just.
That was convenient, Scott.
Yeah.
That was good. Wait,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
We
So-
didn't make any promises when he comes back in.
Right. So yeah, there will be a little bit more administrative work to it, and also the tracking of it annually, collection of annual fee, things of that nature. It would all be tracked through the Community Core process.
What do your construction people say, your construction inspectors? Do they think that we ought to have a system like Fort Collins, or like just the ICC?
I think it's 50-50. There's some say, how come you guys don't require contractor licensing? And those are the quality guys. And the others say, nah, we don't need that. Because they
Well, those that have it think it's cheap, to those that don't have it, and then.
right now, they're coming to Windsor because they can't do it in Fort Collins. They can't do it in Loveland, can't do it in Greeley. So they're
But
coming
how
to-
big of a problem do we have? I mean, I've never heard from a single constituent.
Here's the challenge with it, Ms. Mayor. Madam Mayor, is that
when a homeowner comes in to get their permit, they can say they're doing all their work themselves. And then they hire an electrician that's unlicensed. We try to catch them, but when they're normally not on site when we're there to do an inspection. So they're gone, they're long gone. So it's a challenge. I mean, this is nothing new to Windsor. This is happening all across the Front Range. It happens every single day. Unlicensed people do work. That's just the way it is.
So go with that scenario. Somebody hires an unlicensed person. Maybe they're stupid for doing so. So,
Yep.
okay, they take a risk, but they went cheap, they wanted whatever, they hired a guy. You go in and you inspect it, you go, whoops, this is all wrong.
Mhm.
You did this wrong, that wrong, I can't approve it.
Yep.
And the homeowner is stuck, and he says, oh, I can't even find the guy anymore, I don't know where he is. But, so what? So now you have a licensed guy who goes in and screws up the work, and you go in and inspect it, and guess what? He's not there, or his LLC has been disbanded because he sure as hell protected his assets. So what? So what did you benefit? You got license fee. You admitted that it doesn't mean they know anything about
Sure.
the code.
I think once that they know that what we do now is we do regulate at permit application licensed electricians, and it's getting ready to happen to licensed plumbers. It just passed. So we have to do what's called a contemporaneous review process. And that is posted on the town's website now for electricians. So when a new homeowner comes in and says, we're using Benchmark Electric, or whoever it may be, the permit tech has to make sure that that person has a master's and a contractor's license at the state level. That's a mandatory thing. That's in our contemporaneous review. That's getting ready to happen to plumbing. We're going to have to do the same thing. So those two trades, we're going to try to regulate if they put them on the permit application. If the homeowner, we're going to have some rules that say, what if the homeowner comes in and says, and this happens in commercial too, where they still haven't got all their bids in, and they say unknown. So there may be a point where we say, no, we can't issue the permit unless we know who's doing the work. I mean, that's,
Well, I think if there's another process here that you're not looking at too, is like when we're doing housing or doing something, they're pulling a permit, and we don't know who the contractor is, we don't know whether he's carrying liability insurance. The long one is if something goes wrong and we inspect it or something happens and that guy's gone, he has no liability insurance and the house burns down, who's gonna, we're the last people to look at it, and he's in some other country. And who's got deep pockets? It's the town of Windsor does, because it comes back as a liability on you guys for inspecting it.
That goes to the insurance, but the licensing is irrelevant to that.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, I want to have, and I'm a contractor, I want to know who's doing what work. And the way you do that is you have a licensing process, and you make sure that, like all the other towns that I've been licensed in, I'm probably licensed in 15 different towns. But what they require, one is that, I have the plumbing license, I have the contractor's license, and I carry, $3 million worth of liability, or that permit is not pulled and I can't work in that town.
like I said, I think the contractor licensing is going to keep the honest people honest, but it's not going to take care of 100% of your problem.
No, but it's gonna fit them off a little better.
Yeah, it's going to help them a little bit, but it's not going to stop people.
The other piece, I think your lesser concern is the homeowners who are looking to cut corners. But it's the homeowner who thinks they are doing it right. The contractor says, oh yeah, you just need to go down to town hall, pull the permit, and they go do that. And then this unscrupulous contractor who doesn't, the homeowner doesn't know that they don't have the proper credentials because they just assume. So I think it's that.
License is gonna cure that either.
But I think it's one of those things that it becomes known that the town maintains a database. So when Joe Schmo comes to my door wanting to inspect my roof, I can get on the town's website and go, oh, yep, he's got a license, you know, he's a licensed contractor with the town of Windsor, versus, well, we don't have a database of this, so I'm just assuming the guy with the ladder and the truck at my door is someone I should pay money to.
So what you're saying though is the way the town can mitigate this is when somebody comes to get a permit, we ask who's doing all the different trades that are in the house so that the town knows, hey, Benchmark was the plumber that you picked or whatever, and we know that they're, so that if they choose to use somebody else and they just pencil with the paperwork, et cetera, there's recourse. At least the town said, well, you said this is who you were using. If that's not who you ended up using, then.
But we're already getting the subcontractors on the building permit applications.
We do, if they list them on there, we put them in. Yeah. If they
Well,
list them on there.
what happens if somebody comes and just writes self, it just says they're doing it all themselves?
And they can do that, the law says they can. If they're building, if they're living there, even the state statute say they can wire it.
So we're not necessarily, we're talking about residential, not commercial or both, or.
It's both, really.
I walk into places and I'll walk in, I'll see guys that I know are licensed. They're not their own friends. And they're out there working on their own. Well, that's, first off, it's state regulation.
The mechanical piece is really the challenge right now. We can regulate plumbing and electrical and contractor license in a building. Mechanical's a little bit different. It's not regulated at the state and it's really not regulated anywhere. So, but at least we're taking a piece of the pie. We're taking a little bit chunk of it and saying, let's regulate some of it. Our system, what it does is once we know that our community core software system, once the permit tech is entered, and I'll just say Benchmark Plumbing, once she's entered in there and checked it and verified it, our system will know that they're current. If she types it in 6 months later and it comes up red, they either haven't paid their contractor license or their contractor license has been removed. So it kind of flags them.
You had in your earlier example said some of them just say unknown. Now, would this process require them to put in the name of?
It would. I think it would. I think we would want to. Yeah. Because without contractor license today, we don't care who's on that application.
I think it's a great idea. I mean, it's another layer of government, granted, it won't be 100%. A lot of buyer beware anyway. But I think, you know, you go on next door, I need some concrete work done. Well, call Fred at da-da-da, or call Joe at da-da-da. I mean, not even a company name on there. And I think it'd be nice if we'd have to get the word out somehow that we are issuing licenses, and it'd be best for the citizen to check with town hall, are these people licensed? I think it just gives another layer of confidence. And I think it's a service to our citizens as well.
And Rose, so I'm certain you've been involved with this in the past, how much time do you give the contractor to do? Like, I know it's, you wouldn't make it effective immediately, so how much time do you actually build into a program?
That's a great question because it makes something that I didn't talk about with adoption. When we do a code adoption, we always give the builder 6 months to comply. So if our target date is January 1 or July 1st, we go 6 months of basically education to say, hey, that used to work under the 12, it doesn't work under the 18 now. Here's what you need to do. And so we do that on every code cycle. We give them a 6-month grace period. I think we would have to give some sort of a grace period on this as well.
So I think we've seen, I think it's stirred up a lot of conversation and thought, but I think we need to see what it means financially, what it means in terms of, how we have to handle the department differently. Does it mean, like Scott said, potentially we have to hire a new person? But I think we need to look at all of what goes with this piece before we make a decision.
Yeah, when you were in the bathroom, Scott was pitching us on a few more people. He was priming us. He explained his side of the story. So.
I was in there for almost 90 seconds. He didn't get one out.
You already approved it, too.
He gave him the unofficial nod. The motion to make official action.
Special meeting. So, Mr. McCarter, is there a hint that if we have licensed someone that we more or less have said they will do good work and we can fix that.
It's like somebody walked in and you guarantee that you're gonna be the best lawyer. So I guess that's a good segue to the last item that I had in that memo, and it's even more conceptual. The residential construction guidelines, I put in a one-page, just really rough draft for your review and consideration as a concept. This would actually be something that recognizes, it would be a voluntary program that would recognize builders that go above and beyond and do things the right way. And so this has come out of a conversation with a couple of different residents that are either in the business or they are inspectors that inspect resale homes. And the complaints that we get right now are probably mostly regarding concrete flat work and failed driveways, patios, and sidewalks. So this document, while it says general construction guidelines, it's really only pertaining to concrete in this first step to see if this is something that town board would like to look at. And I'm really wide open to any ideas that the board may have regarding recognition of these builders. But, you know, one of the things that I hear more often than not is that if someone stretched their budget to get into their first home and they're at the, you know, the extent of their budget, and 3 years later they've got to spend 10 grand to replace all the flat work around the house. People are pouring concrete year-round. They're pouring it without rebar. They're pouring it to substandard thicknesses and things like that. So other jurisdictions like Fort Collins has gone to a city mix that they call, that they require a certain PSI concrete mix. Some of the other ideas, right, I guess this would be something that if the contractor signed an affidavit and said, yes, I will do all my flat work to the town of Windsor's standards, it wouldn't be something that we go out and inspect every time. We don't inspect flat work right now, but obviously if concrete fails, you can tell if they were doing it to the spec or not. And so we would be essentially on your honor with these affidavits that people say, yes, we'll comply with the town of Windsor standards. And then if they do give us that affidavit, we would recognize them in some way as a preferred builder in Windsor or some sort of recognition that they're going to go above and beyond the minimum building code.
So what criteria would we use to take that away? So, you know, ABC flat work, they're a preferred builder, they say I'm gonna do it, and we get a complaint that 3 driveways they poured are all cracked in 6 months. I mean, at what point do we take that away?
We'd revoke it as soon as we find out that they've not complied. If they give us an affidavit that says we're gonna use this spec, and we find evidence that they don't use that spec, we would just revoke, they would no longer be on the list automatically.
So, but if we take the evidence like one cracked driveway, we'd say, well, they're not on spec, or like, I'm just saying.
If somebody's having to demo their driveway and re-pour it, we'd be able to see if it's got rebar, if it's got road base, if it's this thick, those kind of things. It's gonna have to be something where we would have to hear from the homeowner, or the property owner.
It's more reinforcement in the concrete. I mean, and I don't, not trying to sound funny, I've said this years teaching at Front Range. There's 2 types of concrete, one that's cracked and one that's not cracked yet. And that's it, they all crack. That's just inevitable. But I think, like, we have builders today that put reinforcement, whether it's wire mesh or number 4 rebar in there, to where it does crack, it doesn't separate and it doesn't heave and it doesn't cause a serious problem. So I think we want to be careful with cracking, because it's going to crack. You know.
Don't we have something in the code anyway that protects us? I mean, I really don't want to see the town itself become a regulator, or even more than that, somebody who is supposedly building up only certain builders who have today met this criteria, but maybe tomorrow all of a sudden don't. I think it's something that is self-guarded anyway with Nextdoor and all these folks. When somebody does you wrong, they get on there and it lights up, and that alerts a lot of folks about a problem. If it's a health safety factor, then something like that should be in the code anyway that says it has to be.
And we do
Not
regulate
something that
that.
we're going around regulating and saying, well, this group never, is confirming that they're always going to do this. Who's going to regulate it? Who's going to check it? It adds just another whole level of enforcement.
Well, I guess that's why the concept would be that it's a voluntary program, that if the builder wants to go above and beyond what the minimums in the building code might be, then they could choose to be part of the program, or if they say it's not worth my time, I don't want to be part of the program, they wouldn't have to.
Yeah, but those that do, somebody has to make sure that they're following the rules, and every single, somebody who's building a ton of homes, who's gonna go inspect the one, sometimes these folks, they contract with all different folks, something can go wrong, and it's not even intentional, or a good builder can have these mess ups. So I think there's another way to get to the crux of what we're trying to do, rather than this. It sounds too time consuming, to have to manage.
Cal, do you have another community that's got a program like this?
No, that's why it's so conceptual. This is something that, in order to protect, I guess, if say we do have a builder that uses shoddy flat work contractors, I know that there's been a class action lawsuit over in Loveland in that neighborhood behind Lowe's where all of the driveways were poured about this thick, and the neighborhood had to band together and obviously it did self-regulate, but it took a class action lawsuit to get there. I think the thought was that in order to protect the new Windsor home buyer, if they want a level of, I guess, a level of construction that's above and beyond, it's something that would assure them that maybe they're not going to have to replace their concrete in a few years, but
Can't
that's.
just up the requirements? I mean, just bring it up to the rebar and whatever else it takes to make a good driveway, and
Well,
if
see,
they don't comply, then
See, the building code, or the code doesn't require a building permit for driveways or patios. Those
can
are,
we do that?
then we'd have to inspect
The
them.
code does, it says any concrete poured against earth has to be a minimum 3.5 inches thick.
But it's not
But it's
inspected.
not required to be permitted, so flat work is exempt from getting a permit.
So-
We
so-
don't need to inspect,
Good to
and
do
we
that
don't need a
with
permit for sidewalks or driveways.
So none of this flat work is being inspected right now or permitted, and it wouldn't be going forward. It's just that the builder would be voluntarily saying, I certify that I'm gonna build it to a higher standard, not that we're going to require a permit or go out and inspect it.
Yeah. But I just don't know what value it's gonna have. It
Sure.
reminds me of the good housekeeping seal. I mean, that was started many
The
years ago.
5-star.
Sure.
Anybody can go and say, oh, I'm part of the good housekeeping seal.
Or on the Tom
I'm gonna
Martino
do
list or
bigger
something.
and better,
Right.
but do they really live by that standard?
Team Dave Logan.
And it all becomes about just that program. and
Sure.
What, that's what
it's-
they're talking about.
It doesn't really
Team
bear
Windsor.
anything. I think Doc Jones is, I don't know if we can do what he exactly said, but I think maybe we need to look, if we're having a lot of problems with that, how we reinforce it from another perspective.
Well, can I take a tangent here a second? Do we have different codes for Larimer County versus Weld?
They've
I
both
mean, does
adopted.
county line have to do with no?
Right now, they're both on the 18, so they have the same.
Okay, I just
They
didn't
can
know.
make small amendments, but for the most part, they're on the same code.
Okay.
I appreciate the concept of a heads up to the homeowner and recognizing somebody's going above and beyond. I just wonder though, if we put out a list of here's preferred flat work people,
Mhm.
and then something goes wrong, it's almost like we recommended somebody.
Sure.
It feels a little,
And
I don't know if that'd be a legal problem or not.
Yeah, no, and
I
I've
think it's got some, since we don't inspect, we don't really know.
it would
I
def,
would feel bad recommending somebody when I really don't know what they do.
right, no, we would definitely have to have disclaimers in our language, and the affidavit would have to be worded correctly.
And I don't know how big the problem is, but I've heard from residents about flat work and not talking about soil compaction.
Mhm.
And again, I know how big a problem that is, I've heard stories.
I hear
So
about-
if that's an issue on town, I would rather approach it through code and inspection. Because like you said, it can cost the homeowner thousands of dollars 2 or 3 years down the road.
And that's just it. Would it bring up a good case for liability against the town if we said, these people do good work? It's almost like the town's endorsing them, is probably the endorsement.
The other problem you have, these are great prescriptive items for building a driveway, but an awful lot of the problem with driveways are caused by finishing.
Right.
And you may have to do this here, and you say, well, it's a good contractor, but if they don't finish it right, they'll put a lot of water on it, and things like that, which is a common defect in a lot of concrete pours.
Right.
Who would want to call this for a contractor?
Right.
Ian was gonna give a comment to the liability.
This area is not a liability problem for the town. Inspections, building inspections, you know, we don't have exposure for things that go wrong, even if we have an inspection program. And if we were to do this, as Scott just said, we build some disclaimers into it that say, just because you're on this list, the town isn't endorsing you. And just, if you're not on this list, it doesn't mean you're a bad contractor, right? Because it's.
So then why create the list in the first place? It's nonsense, it sounds.
Well, Scott wants to give out gold stars, and I like.
It's going to accomplish it, they would send another layer of paperwork and something else that's.
Even without liability though, I think we would have a PR issue if somebody had our stamp approval.
Yeah, because you know what, no one's gonna read the disclaimers. We already know we put out stuff and all the time, and by the second sentence, they're already reading it.
Right, if you say, oh no, the disclaimer says it doesn't mean anything, it's just why the hell don't you put them on the list?
Yeah.
So,
I think they're good.
how big a problem do you think, just what's your feeling about how big a problem is it? Also, the soil compaction I'm talking about, how big a problem is it? And do any communities actually have code and inspection?
Well, I don't know about code and inspection for flat work, but I hear a lot from the second, it's not the new home buyers, it's from the inspectors that do the resale inspections. That new homes that were built 5 years ago, replacing driveways already, those kind of things. You do hear that quite a bit. But the other question that you had was?
I just wonder if other communities have a code or inspection program for flat work.
I think it's pretty similar to Windsor. If we were gonna go in that direction of a code required road base, rebar, certain mix of concrete, I think we'd almost have to require a engineer's certification that it was poured that way, because there's no way that we could get inspectors out to every single time flat work's being poured. So we would be putting it back on the contractor to provide us with a letter saying that, yes, it was, right.
Well, like you said, there's so many variables that can come into play. If they pour when it's too cold outside, it can cause a problem. It'd be the right thickness and everything.
Is there some way we can regulate it under the contractor licensing thing? I mean, maybe if we get too many complaints of a flat worker that has X amount of, maybe we don't allow them to renew the contractor license. I mean, I don't know how legal that is either, but.
I think we'll have to look into that one. But I think it sounds like this concept's maybe a little bit unbaked. And, but the contractor licensing, we need to do a little more follow-up
You're
with.
addressing the right problem, I think, but we don't know.
Yeah, it's probably the number one complaint I get, and it is an expensive problem when people have to deal with it, so.
Well, and does that lead back to what we talked about earlier, where they have to have a minimum ICC certification or something like that? Or so at least there's some bar that the town has set, you know, so that.
Well, that'd be a test requirement for a general contractor license, but it wouldn't be for anybody that pours concrete.
I agree.
But I mean, it may take a hit if the general contractor or the ICC certified contractor is hiring these people, it may take a hit on him to say, hey, you got a guy that's got 4 strikes against him or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, can't the city mandate what concrete has to be used in driveways?
You could amend the code. Right now, it's 2,500 PSI as a minimum.
Right.
Or
So, and I think the mix for Fort Collins is 3,000 PSI.
I thought they said it was 4,500.
For flat work, I think it's 25.
Okay.
Yeah, am I wrong,
No,
Caleb?
I think you're right.
I think it's
don't know
25.
what Fort Collins adopted as far as.
I think they,
Okay.
yeah, it's 4,500 for severe climate for foundations and stuff, but for
Right.
flat work, I think it's 2,500.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring up the ICC thing is because I think from a communication standpoint, we can tell the residents, our constituents, be sure to hire somebody if you're looking to have somebody done that's got this ICC, you know, designation. Because that could be our little point of endorsement, if you will, for lack of a better term. You know, saying that we recommend you use one of these certified providers.
Well, and that's where it goes back to the buyer, the first-time home buyer isn't gonna be the one that's hiring the person that pours the driveway. That's gonna be the contractor that does that. When they have to replace the driveway, then they're not gonna be having a general contractor involved. They're just gonna be hiring somebody that pours concrete.
Well, and that's where I come back to it being more like a public service announcement, you know, type of.
But I
Yeah.
don't think we'd ever say we recommend them, because.
I think the wording is choice, but I'm just saying
We will work on the contractor licensing stuff to come back when it comes back with the building code after we've done our outreach, but, we'll,
Yeah, we'll
So
make it a
sad
little
that-
bit more, and we'll
yeah.
definitely have another work session for this, as clearly there's still a lot of discussion to have.
Mhm.
We're close to adopting anything.
yeah.
Okay. All right, well, thank you both.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Okay, the future town board meetings next week, we'll be looking at smoking in the parks, followed by a regular board meeting, and no meeting on April 28th. But we did set up a special meeting on May 18th.
Yeah, I sent that date to Crystal on Friday, but it wasn't in the board packet had already gone out. So in your next, future town
Is
board
that,
meeting,
what time is that?
I haven't given her a time yet. We talked about 5:36 to get that started, so.
On May 18th.
Yeah, May, yes. So the day I sent out on my weekly update, so again, I sent that out, yeah, that was Wednesday, May 8th. Yeah. So, right now, May 8th, so I figured out, we'll have a special meeting, which is EDA and Brinkman on May 8th. And so that'll be in your next future, meetings agenda, because we didn't have that set until Friday, and the packet went out, Wednesday afternoon, so, it'll be on your next one. And I'm not sure if we'll set it up, or one of those. Okay, great. And I got your note, Ken, so we'll, I know that Crystal's gonna call them as if they could. Yeah, well, yeah, well, that's, no problem. We've got